Good evening, everybody. We will start this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask all of my colleagues to unmute and please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
to the United
United
States
States
of
of
America
America
and to
and
the
to the republic
for which
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one nation
one nation,
under
under God,
indivisible
indivisible,
with
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 liberty
liberty
and
for all.
and
justice
for all.
Thank you. Because this is a remote meeting, I'm going to ask Ms. Sullivan to please call the roll.
Đây là một cái cuộc họp online cho nên tôi sẽ yêu cầu một nhân viên phát biểu trước.
Dr. Coleman, Dr. Rivera,
Here.
Ms. Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Tran,
Yes,
Mr. O'Neill is not with us tonight. Ms. Oliver Davila,
Present.
thank you. We have a quorum with Dr. Coleman and Mr. O'Neill absent.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman will be joining us shortly. Tonight's meeting is being shared live on Zoom. It will be
Nay cái cuộc họp sẽ được
on Boston City TV and posted on the school committee's webpage, bostonpublicsschools.org/school committee, and on YouTube. For those of you, joining us on Zoom or at a later date, you can find tonight's meeting documents posted on the committee's webpage, bostonpublicsschools.org/school committee, under the December 2nd meeting link. The agenda, presentations, and equity impact statements have been translated in all of the major BPS languages. The committee is once again thrilled to be offering live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and American Sign Language throughout the meeting. Look for the interpretation icon, the globe, at the bottom of your screen and select your language preference. In order to access this feature, you must update the latest version of Zoom. If you need to do so, please visit support.zoom.us. Will our Spanish interpreters please invite our Spanish-speaking audience to switch to their Zoom channel in Spanish? Will the ASL interpreters
Good
please
evening.
Zoom instructions in ASL?
Good evening. My name is Juan Bernal. I am the Spanish interpreter. I will be providing simultaneous and consecutive interpretation throughout the duration of this meeting. I will now instruct the Spanish speakers how to connect through the icon for simultaneous interpretation. I will proceed to do that in Spanish. Para aquellas personas que necesiten el servicio de interpretación simultánea, deben buscar en la parte baja de sus pantallas el icono de interpretación que parece un globo de la Tierra. Seleccionen el idioma español. En caso de que ustedes no vean este icono en la parte baja de la pantalla y tengan un teléfono, un smartphone u otro computador y no vean el icono, tienen que bajar la versión más actualizada de Zoom que les permita ver el icono. Vamos a poner en el chat la dirección donde pueden bajarlo, que es el https://zoom.us/downloads para que ustedes puedan bajar la versión en caso de que no tengan acceso al icono. De lo contrario, busquen el icono redondo en la parte de abajo de la pantalla y seleccionen español. Thank you very much. Next interpreter, please proceed.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Luz Barreto, estaré interpretando con Juan Bernal. Estamos a la orden, así que cada 30 minutos nosotros vamos a intercambiar y vamos a estar pendientes de hacerle lo mejor posible. Él ya les explicó las instrucciones.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Juan and Luz. Apologies for that. I should have introduced you. Also, we'll ask Michael Hirschberg, Sarah Kuznetsky, and Sherry Kuhn if they could interpret ASL, please, on the Zoom instructions. And also, I'm going to ask the Mandarin interpreter to please give Zoom instructions in Mandarin. That's Tina Wang and Maple Zhu.
各位好，如果您需要普通话同声传译服务的话，请在屏幕的底部找到翻译这个图标，就是一个地球仪，然后选择您所需的语言选项。如果您在计算机或智能手机上看不到这个功能，请用以下链接更新至最新版本的 Zoom， 是 https 然后://zoom.us/download。 Go ahead, please, Maple.
嗨，大家好，我也是今天晚上的国语翻译 Maple。那么各位好，如果你需要普通话同传服务的话，请在屏幕的底部找到翻译的图标，然后选择您所需要的语言首选项。如果您在计算机或者智能手机上看不到这个功能的话，请你在链接上去下载最新的版本。谢谢。
Thank you. Will the Cantonese interpreters please give Zoom instructions in Cantonese? That's Anna C. and Terry Yin.
大家好，我係Terry， 我係大家嘅廣東話翻譯。咁我同阿 Anna 咧會今日咧同大家翻譯呢個廣東話嘅同傳嘅服務。咁如果你哋需要嘅話咧，你哋可以喺呢個屏幕下邊揾到一個地球嘅咁嘅圖標，咁咧你就可以選廣東話嘅。咁如果你個電腦上邊或者你嘅手機係冇嘅話咧，你可以去個 Zoom 嘅網站上邊去 download 個最新嘅版本嚇。咁我哋會提供呢個廣東話嘅服務嘅。唔該晒你 ，Anna。
大家好，好高興我哋今日咧，我同 Terry 今日會為大家提供廣東話翻譯嘅。頭先 Terry 講嘅嘢咧都係啦。如果你咧係冇你本身嘅電腦咧係冇手機係冇呢個支援嘅咧，你可以上電腦咧係下載最新嘅版本。如果你而家你嘅電腦咧係有呢個支援，或者你嘅平台係有呢個支援嘅，你就撳下面嗰個咧係選擇廣東話翻譯啦。多謝大家 ，Thank you。
Thank you. Will the Vietnamese interpreter please give Zoom instructions in Vietnamese? Duyen True and Vai Ly.
Chị Vi có thể giới thiệu dùm được không ạ?
Dạ được.
Dạ.
Dạ xin chào quý vị, tất cả phụ huynh và học sinh. Tôi tên là Vi Lê.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for assisting us this evening. So thank you to everybody who has signed up for public comment this evening. Sign up for both public comment periods closed today at 4:30 p.m. Ms. Sullivan will remind everybody about the public comment rules again later on. But just a quick reminder for those of you who've signed up to testify, if you could please make sure that you are signed into Zoom under the same name that you used to sign up for public comment. You can use the Zoom tools to rename yourself so that the committee staff are able to recognize you when it comes time to call on you. And we really thank you for your cooperation in that. We are going to now move on to the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on November 18th, 2020. So at this time, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 18th meeting as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Coleman,
Yes.
Dr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Oliver Davila.
Yes.
The minutes are passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. I know that the superintendent is going to address the ongoing public health rates in her comments this evening, and she will also be sharing more information about what we're reviewing and seeing from our colleagues at the Boston Public Health Commission. She has kept me and the committee updated, and we've received regular updates from the mayor as well as Chief Martinez. The committee looks forward to partnering with the superintendent and city leaders on a smart and safe return to school buildings as quickly as we can, and with a deep commitment to ensuring students access high quality instruction and support services both in school buildings and in remote learning. I know that there are a lot of questions about the timeline for reopening school buildings. And in fact, I know there was a rally today at City Hall. I want everybody to know that we hear you. and we agree that honoring family choice and providing the opportunity to access hybrid learning remains a priority for all of us. So now I'm going to move on to the superintendent's report. I present to you our superintendent, Dr. Brenda Cassellius.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks everyone for being on the call and members for being here this evening. I hope that everyone had a wonderful holiday, and I know that we're all looking forward to winter break for some needed rest and to be able to spend even more time with family and friends. It's hard to believe that we're already in December, but I know that we're all glad to see 2020 come to a close, and hopefully better days are ahead here in 2021. And as we look forward to 2021, we look forward to bringing back more of our students to our buildings, gearing up for budget season and prioritizing our investments to provide an equitable recovery for our students and for the larger community. As we shift to more proactive strategic approach in our work ahead, I'm very much looking forward to working with the school committee next Wednesday during our professional development meeting and during our retreat on Saturday, December 12th, which is a public meeting. I invite members of the community to join us as we do a deep dive into our work becoming an anti-racist district and focusing our efforts on providing an excellent and equitable education for every single one of our BPS students. And I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for your collaboration on this training and for your leadership in making these upcoming meetings a priority for this body. Now I'd like to share just a few updates from around the district and the city. Whenever I can get people together, I want to just prioritize this first statement, and that is that I really want to impress upon our public that the best way to get our kids back in school is for all of us to comply to the public guidance and to help us keep our community safe by heeding this health guidance and getting tested, and making sure that we wash our hands, making sure that we don't go out if we're not sick, making sure that we are staying within our family units and not expanding in large gatherings, and wearing our mask. These are the things that are really going to help us open schools, because that's what really drives down these rates. But in the meantime, if everyone can go and get tested, that then gives us the information on how to then quarantine or stay safe ourselves and keep everybody else safe. And so I want to announce some additional free mobile testing sites that are located around Boston this week. We have East Boston, Central Square Park, and also at the Roxbury and Washington Park Mall. Hours for both sites for the rest of the week are tomorrow and Friday, 1 o'clock until 5:30 p.m. and on Saturday, December 5th from 10 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. Anyone can get tested for free and regardless of your symptoms or immigration status. So please make sure you make an appointment, which can be scheduled by calling 617-568-4500. Also this week, the city is offering free walk-up testing at Anna Mae Cole Community Center in Jamaica Plain. Testing is open tonight until 7 and tomorrow from 3 to 7 p.m. And in addition to the city's 2 mobile testing sites and this week's testing in Jamaica Plain, COVID-19 testing is available at over 30 locations across the city. You can call the Mayor's Health Line with any questions at 617-534-5050. You can also visit boston.gov/coronavirus for resources and more information, or simply call 311. Next week, December 7th through the 13th, is Computer Science Education Week, a global initiative to promote computer science in our schools. And since 2015, the BPS Technology Department has engaged over 100 schools in this program through student contests, field trips, workshops, networking events, webinars, and more. This year, BPS Technology will be celebrating with student contests, asynchronous activities, and social media campaign. Student contests are open to all BPS students and include Scratch animation for grades K through 6, Scratch app for grades 3 through 8, app design and concepts for grades 6 through 12, app programming for grades 9 through 12, and the Express Yourself Challenge, open to all grades K through 12. In addition, the BPS technology team will be updating their website with additional asynchronous activities. Please visit bit.ly/BPS coders for more information. School registration season is upon us. Beginning Tuesday, January 5th, families can begin registering students entering K0, K1, 6th grade, 7th, and 9th grade for the 2021-22 school year. Beginning Monday, February 8th, families of students entering K2 and all other grades may begin registering for the 21-22 school year. In the meantime, prospective BPS students are encouraged to check out BPS school preview times. While we aren't able to open up our schools for visits this year, each BPS school is hosting a virtual school preview time between now and the end of January. These virtual sessions are a great opportunity for families to learn more about each school community, meet the school leaders, ask questions about the school and various programs they offer. A list of school preview times are available at bostonpublicschools.org/school preview. Additional details on the school registration process are available at bostonpublicschools.org/register. In October, the school committee accepted the exam school admissions criteria working group recommendations for changing the admissions process to exam schools for the 21-22 school year. And in light of the complications presented by COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on student learning, BPS is hosting virtual information sessions for our parents and interested stakeholders to inform the community of the admissions process for next school year and to help answer any questions the community may still have. We've already hosted a couple of these sessions and we have about 5 more webinars scheduled. Our next session is for this Friday, December 4th, from 4:30 to 6 p.m. We'll have interpretation services in Arabic, Cabo Verdean, Creole, Cantonese, and Somali. We're also hosting 4 more sessions next week with interpretation services available in additional languages. Full details on the admissions process, including meeting information and an FAQ is available at bostonpublicschools.org/exam. We're actively working to establish the next exam working group. Based on feedback and testimony, we will add additional members to this working group to include students and current 5th grade parents. We will convene this working group after the winter holiday. As part of the data privacy policy that was passed on September 16, 2020, I'm announcing tonight that I'll be establishing a school safety working group. This oversight body will be charged with continuing to examine the policy, reviewing BPS data, meeting on a quarterly basis with me and my team, and making recommendations to the school committee. This working group will consist of 12 members representing students, parents, educators, BPS community members, community advocacy groups, and I will announce those members at the next school committee meeting. Those 12 members specifically in the policy, just as a reminder, are BPS student representation with the preference given to a student who attends a school that has historically high numbers of arrests or incident reports, a parent or guardian chosen by the citywide parent council, a member from SPEDPAC, a member chosen by the BTU, a school leader, assistant principal, or dean at a school with an assigned safety services employee, a representative from an immigration, youth, or community advocacy organization chosen by the school committee, a representative by the BPS Office of Opportunity Gaps, a representative from the BPS Operational Leader Team or the BPS Central Office employee with responsibility for advising school administrators on the BPS Code of Conduct, and a representative from the BPS Office of Safety Services, an expert in law enforcement and school safety laws and regulations chosen by the school committee, and 2 representatives from the Superintendent's Student Data Working Group who met this past summer. I'd like to share with you formally my evaluation goals and thank the committee for voting on my evaluation back on August 19th, 2020. And I want to share 3 goals that I've set for this year based on your feedback. These goals are also aligned with key goals outlined in our strategic plan, as well as the DESE MOU for district improvement. Although the outcomes for these goals, I believe, are going to be multi-year, I believe that there's some urgency and focus to this core work, and there's some critical steps that I want to take as the superintendent in order to get this work started. Goal 1, develop and implement a plan to significantly improve the district's capacity to meet the needs of English language learners. Some of the leading indicators of success that I would like to focus on are putting together a published plan of action that has feedback from key stakeholders in the ELL committee, task force, and also equity analysis. I will make a presentation of this plan to the school committee and ask for your review and comment on it. Some of the lagging indicators of success that we will look for are an increased access to high quality language instruction by increasing seats in dual language programming. If it's administered, ensure ELs are making adequate progress in English language proficiency as measured by the mean student growth percentile, otherwise SGP, on the Access for ELs assessment. Increase linguistic diversity of staff as measured by the average representation gap by language between BPS staff members hired each year and the proportion of BPS students enrolled by language category. And increase access to school district policy making and decision making for all community members by providing interpretation services at board meetings and public meetings. Goal 2, to develop and implement a plan to significantly improve the district's capacity to meet the needs of special education students. The first leading indicator of success would be to publish that plan of action with stakeholder feedback and have an equity analysis done. That stakeholder feedback would also include a presentation to SPEDPAC. Then I would present that to the school committee for your review and comment. Some of the lagging indicators of success that I want to propose are first, an increase in training to the COAS and the educators on MTSS problem solving to reduce the numbers of students referred to special education. I'd like to decrease disproportionality in the number of referrals to special education of kids of color. Decrease the number of students with disabilities in substantially separate seats by transitioning students to inclusion classrooms and decreasing the rate at which students are identified for substantially separate programming. And 4, increase the number of students with disabilities in inclusion settings. Goal number 3, I'd like to reorganize the structure and function of the Boston Public Schools Central Office to significantly improve its capacity to close opportunity and achievement gaps in all schools within the district. Leading indicators of success include a functional organizational chart, ensuring a diverse executive leadership team and central office staff that is reflective of our student body, increase opportunities for school leader voice and participation in system level policy decision-making. Lagging indicators will be perceptions of central office effectiveness by our stakeholders, improve educator perception of central office service effectiveness and accountability for results as measured by the average scores on select scales, groups of related items from the teacher climate survey, improve school leader perception of central office service effectiveness and accountability for results as measured by average scores on select scales from a school leader climate survey, improve organizational culture throughout the central office as measured by average score scales on items from a central office climate survey. I will bring all of these 3 goals, the lagging and the leading indicators, to the December 16th meeting for further discussion and a formal vote, and it will be on an agenda item. I just want to give a brief update on reopening and where we're at with that. I know, Chair, you mentioned some of the plans that we are seeking now. We have been meeting with the school leaders. I met with them on Tuesday and again this morning to speak with them about preparations for our in-person learning. We've also been meeting over the past month with our high priority task force, which consists of BTU members, school leaders, students, and the SPEDPAC members to identify a responsible phased-in approach to getting our high need students back in school. As you know, we opened 2 weeks ago for 4 of our K-12 specialized schools that serve some students with very, very complex needs who were having trouble accessing or were unable to access remote learning. And those schools were the Carter, the McKinley, the Henderson, and the Horace Mann schools. The past 2 weeks, we've seen that there are additional measures that we've been able to look at for our metrics in terms of assessing the overall COVID spread within the community, which include the positivity rate and the way that they calculate that in terms of a more recent measure. And then also additional metrics, including hospitals and ICU visits and emergency room visits, and among other metrics. And what we've seen over the past 2 weeks is a trend in the right direction. And that indicates with additional safety measures that we've put in place that we may be able to open more schools to our students and have more of our high priority students return to school. The safety measures that we have added have included offering additional and more convenient testing for staff, providing additional medical grade PPE for staff members beyond the CDC recommendations, installing freestanding air purifiers in each space that will be occupied by students in buildings with steam or mixed ventilation systems, upgrading filters in our HVAC system to match the maximum amount of filtration possible according to industry standards, conducting further air quality and ventilation testing, and greatly limiting the number of students in classrooms and number of staff in buildings. As we continue to watch the trends, we will continue to communicate to parents and the public about the date certain we're aiming for this return. At this time, I'm asking our school leaders to prepare for the welcoming back of students when Boston Public Health Commission gives us the green light. And finally, I want to just give an update. Last week, we had a number of parents and community members who spoke to the Mather and our dual language program that we intend to move to the Mather School. I want to just take a moment to share with you what we have done since that meeting. My team met with parents following the school committee meeting on November 19th. We met again with staff from the Mather this week to listen, answer their questions, and share additional information about our planning and about dual language programming and SEI programming and the benefits of each. We are committed to continuing to listen and to plan with the community and the school community. It is clear that we must continue to engage with the community to ensure consistent communications about the program and our next steps. Dr. Sylvia Romero Johnson is our new Assistant Superintendent for Office of English Learners, and Mary Driscoll, the school superintendent who oversees and supports the Mather, have been engaged in these ongoing conversations, and so has the school leader and her team, and we will keep them updated on our progress, and I will in turn also keep this committee updated. We're grateful for their continued partnership and with the entire Mather school community for their understanding and willingness to continue to lean into this really important dialogue. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'd now like to open up to any questions from committee members. So if you could raise your hand, let me know if you have a question. Yes, Ms. Robinson, go right ahead.
Righty. Superintendent, thank you very much for your report. Can you talk a little bit more about both school preview time and what changes there will be to school registration for families given the inability to have as much or any in-person activity over the next several months?
Ms. Monica Roberts is on the call, and I will defer to her if she's able to answer that question, or I will come back in terms of the changes that we've made, if I can, to bring that information to you when she is able to come back on.
Okay.
Because I'm not aware of any changes, any major changes at this time.
Okay.
To that.
Okay.
Oh, I think Monica is turning turning on.
My apologies, if you can repeat the question I was doing with my 8-year-old.
No, okay. My question was, what kinds of changes will be happening to the school registration procedures, as well as school preview times, given it now all needs to be done virtually?
Yeah, so all of our schools are hosting virtual times. We've given them some tips and tools on how to do that. The classroom, my understanding is a lot of the school leaders are engaging the classroom teachers much more around that, and many of them have already started actually, so that's been good. The other thing that we're doing is holding more information sessions and asking our community partners who have access to families who may not be in the BPS to support us with that effort. Our Office of Welcome Services has been working strategically with the city to think about how we market differently in this time. And so they have been, we'll probably rely less on the trains, for example, more on buses, billboards, ethnic media are things that we've been really pushing for, that things that they've already started, but we'll ramp up even more so to make sure that we're getting the word out, including direct mailing, which is not something we've done in a very long time. But it's something that we've been talking to the city about because it's something that they have been doing. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do to make sure we get to our families who are outside of BPS. And obviously we hope our families within BPS will help spread the news about our schools as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question, Superintendent, around some of the SPED work. Will there be any looking at the out-of-district placement of students as we're doing the reorg within BPS? And also, how are we looking at things like providing stronger support to families with children with dyslexia, et cetera? I understand the issue around inclusion classrooms, but wonder when there are children with very specific needs, how do you do both inclusion, but also make sure they're really getting the kind of support that they need?
And those are the kind of questions, Ms. Robinson, that we're going to answer as we begin to develop our plan moving ahead for our students with disabilities, especially as we think about dyslexia and inclusionary practices, and what are the best trainings for our educators, and what training are they going to need. That will all be in that plan. So we're undertaking right now. I have some outside support coming in to really look at the audit that was done by the Council for Great City Schools. That's going to inform the work of our special ed department and some of the work that we're doing. I've specifically, though, focused on our sub-separate program, also MTSS problem solving, so that we can limit the referrals to special ed, and also the disproportionality of students of color in special ed. That's what the focus is of the work ahead, because that's where we really need to focus. But there is also a training element of the instructional programming when you look at inclusionary practices that also will be addressed in the plan.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll pass it on now to Dr. Coleman.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sellis, thank you. I want to respond to the issues of evaluation. Thank you very much for putting that together. I know this is very trying, difficult work, and you have so many opportunities to narrow it down to these three areas. I know it was difficult, and I really respect the work that you've done and the clarity with which you're presenting that. And I look forward to our ongoing conversation as an agenda item in our next meeting. I would just, in preparation for that meeting, like you did in the third area where you talked about as measured by, I think for all the lagging indicators, it'd be nice to add as measured by in each one. I mean, not just the thing that you're looking for, but as measured, how will we know where's the starting point, what's the trend? But thank you very much for that. It's really excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Mr. Tran?
Hi. Thank you, Superintendent Cassellius, for having conducted meetings with the mother school staff and parents, I guess. I have been meeting with parents as well as instructional staff at that school regarding the dual language and the SEI. I recognize the the benefits of both programs. However, there is a concern largely from parents that the dual language program somehow will be the principal program replacing the SEI either next year or sometime down the road. And that concern, I believe, has not been addressed by us or by your office. Could you somehow give me some clarification on where the position of your office is in regard to that concern?
Thank you, Mr. Tran. We are going to continue to work with the Mather community and the understanding and our parents and the school community to understand the benefits of the dual language program and also understand the SEI program. We started those conversations already. Would love to work with you also with the community and talking about the benefits of the dual language program as we really shift in the district under our Look Act to dual language, because the dual language program actually retains the students' language and culture and heritage, which is what we heard so much from the V8 parents when they came and talked with us about dual language and what they loved about it. So as we think and shift toward that, we are going to be having more conversations with our school community and our stakeholders around that. And so as we move forward, we will continue to discuss with Dr. Romero Johnson as we engage with the community around our Look Act planning and the EL planning that I talked about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. Dr. Rivera.
Thank you, Dr. Cassellius. I had a question about the data sharing group, the task force that's being formed for that. Could you say a little bit about what the goal of that task force will be and how it differs from the previous task force that had to do with the data sharing? I guess what I really want to know is this task force going to be the group that will address the issue of having school police officers and negotiating the MOU with the BPD? Is this what the purpose of that group will be? And then I have a second question. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Rivera, thank you for that. No, this is the oversight group that's part of the policy. It's a working group. It's really not a working group. It's more of an oversight group that was developed within the policy for data transparency more so and accountability on the district to implement the policy. And so it is really about monitoring the implementation of the policy, making sure that we are being true to the training, making sure that we're being true to the reporting, and that we are following policy. And it's more of a transparency and accountability oversight kind of committee. And then we have not yet established the working group to look at the MOU and the Boston School Police as of yet. That's work still that I have to get to.
Okay. When do you think that that's going to happen? You're not
as soon
sure
as
yet?
I can get our kids back in school. So it's just been, we don't have school police in our schools, obviously, right now, even though, this planning is important. They're in our schools, but our schools don't have children in them at this time outside of the high priority schools. So right now, a lot of my focus has just been on reopening and trying to manage some of the school registration pieces and exam school pieces, because we need to have that for school choice. And as we think to build PPS, there's some decisions tonight that I needed to get to the school committee as well as we begin to think about options for parents in the school choice season. So I hope to bring it around probably after the new year, Dr. Rivera. I want to get to that as well.
Okay, I just concerned if there's any way that the negotiations with the city's contract is going to be, if there's a connection here at all in terms of that timeline for the city's negotiation of the contract. Is that separate?
Yeah, they're BPS employees, so it has nothing to do with us.
Okay, all right, thank you for that clarification. My other question has to do with, parents have been surveyed about remote learning experiences, but I'm wondering to what extent have the actual students in BPS been surveyed about their experiences with remote learning?
Yeah, so we have surveyed the students as well. And I would need to defer to our ODA department on the most recent surveys of students. I talk to BSAC all the time, which has been wonderful, but that's just a representative body of the student body at each school. And they've actually given me, though, really good feedback from their peers, and the feedback that I got with them around, whether videos are turned on, the type of instruction, the number of hours that they have for instruction, the quality of the instruction. And I shared some of that feedback with our school leaders. So I had a meeting on Thursday, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, with BSAC, and shared that on Friday. So they bring a summative of that. But then in terms of the overall survey, I will have to come back with you about what we're going to be doing for a future survey for our students. I do think that they were surveyed recently as well, but I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I do actually have one more question, sorry. I know that there's been, a lot, we're all concerned about the numbers of enrollments. I wondered if there's any data that can be provided to the school committee at our next meeting, or if you know something now about breaking those enrollments down by race and ethnicity. I saw some data, but it did have, ELs broken out. But I wonder if there's any, again, concerning patterns of particular groups that are, more disadvantaged than others in terms of, not being in our schools anymore. I'm curious if there's any data on that. And that'll be my last question. Thank you.
Yeah, we have enrollment on our now on our site, and the state released that last week. As for our student surveys, I have my staff telling me that the students are also being surveyed. I knew the survey went out on parents and staff, and so we want to make sure that we also are surveying our parents. That's due on the December 17th.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. I just wanted to add that it would be great to share the survey, the youth survey, the student survey with partners. So I know Monica Roberts has been attending some of the Boston After School and Beyond meetings, and that can be shared there because we can actually get more students to fill those out. And I saw at one of the meetings, because I don't remember how many school committee meetings ago I had asked about what were the rules around remote learning, because it seemed like such a disparity from what I was hearing from students. So I saw there was something uniform. So I'm hoping, everybody looks at that, because I know the students that I talked to have given me, different takes on whether they can or can't turn their camera on. So I appreciate that we have something. And I don't know, I assume it's on our websites. Hopefully it's there, so every student can look at it. And then I wanted to say, I appreciate the goals. I think I'm really happy to see the goal around ELL students, and the SPED identification and the training, I think, is really important as well. And the central office, the climate, because central office is here to support our schools. And so we need to make sure that central office is also healthy and there's a good climate, so our schools can get the most out of that support. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, I'm glad there's more conversations happening with the Mather. What I will say is, I don't want to make it sound simplistic, but I think it will be important in the way that we use like our equity tool to be able to give us information when we're making a policy decision. It's something similar, you know, when it comes to including community and making sure that that, you know, actually happens and the community feels heard, both, you know, not just the school itself, like in terms of like teachers and staff, but also, you know, the parents and the external community. So if there's a way to just take a deeper dive, I don't know, Monica's department and Ms. Roberts' department, maybe you can look at that. I don't want to make it seem like it's just a paper checklist, but it is one way and one strategy. But I think we'd like to keep, you know, continuing to make sure that the community is heard and they feel like we're partnering with them on that. So thank you for bringing that back. And that's all my comments. So if there is no further discussion, I would like to entertain a motion to receive the superintendent's report.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Coleman,
Yes.
Dr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Oliver Davila.
Yes.
The report is approved unanimously.
Okay. Before we move on to general public comment, I just want to say that I really am missing our fellow member, Mr. O'Neill. I just want to say that because I haven't been to a school committee meeting where he was not at. So I'm sure he's watching. I just want to say we missed your presence, sending you lots of good vibes. So before we move on to public comment, I also want to invite our amazing student representative, Mr. James, to present his first monthly update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, for your report. So I will be giving my first monthly BSAC report. I'd like to start with a membership update. BSAC members are at 100% representation. BSAC is at 100% representation. This includes our alternative ed programs such as Boston Collaborative. We're at 50 members and we have about 40 students at most meetings, and we're constantly making sure that we continue to do that outreach to those remaining students who may have trouble attending those meetings, whether it's scheduling conflicts, other responsibilities, etc. But yeah, and we just held elections for our officer positions, which include president, VP, secretary, media chair, and teens and print writer. And the results will be announced this Thursday of the winners. And, just, for information to all of you, if you need more information about teens in print, it's a program, it's a writing program in Boston, and it's a youth journalism program, more specifically for 8th through 12th graders. And we have a column in the paper called the BSAC Buzz, if you want to check it out. Moving on to our subcommittees, we have 3 subcommittees this year, as it's usually historically has been. We have Environmental Justice and Sustainability Subcommittee, the School Climate, Culture, and Improvement Subcommittee, and then the Student Rights and Student Vote Subcommittee. It's no surprise that BSAC is working on a lot of projects, especially these individual subcommittees, but just to highlight some of the major projects that we're really looking forward to working on and pushing this year, starting with Environmental Justice and Sustainability Subcommittee, also referred to as the EJ. The overview of that subcommittee is improving the environment and taking on climate change. They did some voter registration work that was absolutely amazing, especially prior to the presidential election. BSAC members spent over 150 hours this year reaching out to people of color, and specifically voters across the country to get out the vote for the general election. And we're still continuing to do that with the Georgia Senate runoff. They made over 2,000 phone calls and sent over 150,000 texts to voters this fall. Our wins this year also include community choice electricity passing in the city of Boston. BSAC members facilitated trainings on CCE and the practices of competitive electric suppliers. And then last but not least, team members presented at DEP and City Councilor Matt O'Malley's office hearings this year on issues such as environmental justice, waste management, and zero net standards. Moving on to school climate, culture, and improvement, also referred to as CCI, which is actually the subcommittee I sit on. The overview of that is improving school climate and culture, positively impacting instruction and pedagogy, and improving school relationships and overall school improvement. Working with the BPS Office of Accountability we work with the BPS Office of Accountability to ensure that Boston's Community School Initiative, Hub Schools, is implemented with an emphasis on educational equity and student empowerment, as well as sort of, really getting that community-focused lens for education, as well as a more efficient practice in pedagogy. Also collaborating with the student immigration movement to push for the City Council to adopt an ordinance establishing community oversight of surveillance technologies and working to secure the privacy of all BPS students. We're also working on setting up listening circles with Boston school police officers to build a mutual understanding and trust between Boston School Police and the students whom they serve, with the ultimate goal of enacting a vision of police-free schools. And then working with a variety of education justice advocacy groups in the city to ensure that the Student Opportunity Act will be fully funded and to fight against possible measures taken by Beacon Hill in response to budget shortfalls precipitated by the coronavirus pandemic. And then going on to our last subcommittee is student rights and student vote. The overview of this subcommittee is building opportunities and increasing, student voice in decision-making. So, they're working on securing voting rights for the student member on the school committee. Obviously, this extends way beyond me, but for every student representative after me. And just a special shout out to the City Council, especially City Councilor Anissa Sabi-George, for filing a home rule petition. We're working very closely with her office this year, and we're very excited to be pushing for the student representative on the school committee to receive a vote and to sort of transition away from the notion of student voice being lip service and actually being implemented in policy. BSAC members have served on high and school priority planning teams to share their concerns and feedback on students returning to school. This is something that we would like to see more of just beyond interest groups, which is actually a conversation I brought up at the last school committee meeting. We met with Jacob Stern in the Office of Data and Accountability, and BSAC provided feedback on the BPS School Climate Survey. And 2 students currently sit on the High In-Person Priority, also known as HIPP or HIP Task Force, and the Opportunity and Achievement Gaps OAG Task Force. And on top of all that, BSAC is meeting with Superintendent Casilius on a monthly basis. So we meet with her once a month, and we look forward to possibly making that a little bit more frequent. And I guess last but not least, a more long-term project that I personally wanted to share with you all that I have taken on. I wouldn't say myself, but it's sort of like in my brain, and I'm going to be working with BSAC staff and other community leaders as well to make sure that we can actually roll this out in the next school year. But I've met with students in different middle schools, students and teachers. And, they've reached out to my BSAC, to the BSAC manager, Maria Estrada, regarding middle school student government and providing support and setting up a sort of student government structure in their schools. And I had the idea, and, I'm saying this very prematurely, I don't want to make any promises, but I sort of proposed the idea of having a middle school BSAC next school year. And I think that this is really, I think personally to me, it means a lot to me, and it's really critical to me because I'm big on student engagement and student voice. Like I said in the last school committee meeting, I think it should come as natural as drinking water to stay healthy. I think that's how important student voice is. And when I remember my own time in middle school, and when I spoke to a lot of teachers and a lot of friends who are in high school, in my grade even, who reflect on their times in middle school, we weren't really given the opportunities and chances to both learn about the system and rebel against it and sort of question authority and ask like, hey, are you doing what's right for us? So I think a middle school BSAC would be not only a great thing for the students that actually are involved in it, but a more symbolic message to all students that you can learn what's going on in your community, no matter how young you are. You can learn what's going on in your community, and you can have an impact, and you can challenge authority, because that is how change is created. And that concludes the BSAC monthly report.
Thank you, Mr. James. Dr. Rivera says she has a question.
Thank you, Mr. James. This is great. I love the middle school BSAC. My son would be all over that. So please do that. I had a question. We would love to have a student member on the English Language Learners Task Force. We tried to get some students, but the meetings used to be like, in the morning, like at 9, 10 o'clock. They're now from 3 to 5 p.m. And I can send the dates, or actually they're public, they're on the schedule there. But it would be wonderful to have a student member now that the time might be more, they might be more able to participate. So please do help us recruit a student member for that task force, because it's also very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rivera. I have some, and my apologies for the sound of the dog in the background, but I did write that down, and I do have some BSAC staff on Zoom who I'm sure has also written that down, and we will be on top of that ASAP.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. I don't see any other, I see your hands raised. Oh, there, Ms. Robinson, if you want to go, and the rest of my colleagues, if you guys can erase your hand up. So for the next time, I'll know if you have your hand up or not. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Robinson.
Yes, Mr. James, thank you very much for your report. I have a question. You were saying that you have almost 40 students now showing up to BSAC meetings. Do you think the fact that they are on Zoom makes it easier for students to be able to participate because of not having to travel to a particular location? And if so, how will you continue to garner that kind of support across the district once in-person opportunities have been resumed?
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. That's a great question. I was actually speaking about this with BSAC's manager, Maria Estrada, yesterday, actually, and the answer to your question is just yes. It is because we're on Zoom now. Zoom has made it much more accessible to students to show up and get involved with BSAC and the work that we do, because all you have to do is switch from one link to another rather than waiting for a bus for 15 minutes and then 20-minute commute. And I think how we continue to hold on to this engagement and really refine the structure in which we invite students into BSAC. One idea that I brought up to my BSAC manager is, if there ever is a time soon, hopefully, when BSAC can start meeting again in the bowling building, maybe exploring a sort of hybrid option where we have like anyone who can come into the bowling building can come in, and then anyone who cannot but can do Zoom, since it's more efficient and convenient for them at the time, can sort of pop up on the screen, and sort of figuring out how the people in the physical space can still interact with the people on the screen. So those, we're thinking about that, and I invite any ideas or critiques from you all about how we can sort of keep that student engagement, because I think it's very important.
Great, yeah. My other thought is I really like the idea of having a middle school BSAC, but even before that, would love to know how the district helps all schools to look at student government from the elementary schools on up, and student voice, even in our early childhood centers, of how are we helping students to find their voice and understand it, so that there's a natural progression to becoming more involved or differently involved as they get older. So I don't know whether we've, if we have any kind of data that talks about what kind of, student government we have across all 125 of our schools, so that all students, again, equitably are being introduced to these ideas and having an opportunity to give their voice, show their voice, find their voice as they engage in their schooling.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point, Ms. Robinson. I 100% agree. I think larger than, definitely I'm thinking larger than a middle school BSAC as well. I think that, going back to what I had said earlier about, kids my age in high school being able to reflect on their younger academic years and saying to themselves, well, my teacher never really told us that there was a school committee, a Boston school committee. They never really told us what the job of the superintendent was or what the job of the school committee was. They never told us what policy changes were happening in our communities, in our school districts, in our schools, and how they were directly impacting us and what we could do about it. I think that the solution to that, larger than just creating a middle school BSAC, since that is, in my opinion, I think that is a step in the right direction. However, I do have to be candid and acknowledge that some can view that as a Band-Aid solution. And if there's anything you guys know about me, I do not necessarily appreciate Band-Aid solutions. So I think the larger solution really attacks the root issue. And I think the root issue is, how are we teaching our curriculum? And how are we implementing it? And I think that this is a much larger conversation that I've heard from some school committee members already and some community members. And I think that it would be really interesting to see some sort of change in how teachers teach content. So for example, my APUSH teacher, this is the first time I'm getting this type of teaching, but my APUSH teacher, when he teaches like the content material, he also somehow finds a way to connect it back to the issues going on in BPS, whether it's about, COVID, or how are policymakers today responding to the pandemic, similar to how policymakers back then were responding to the economic crisis, or et cetera. I think things like that, being able to make connections to the curriculum directly to the issues that are prevalent in society, and sort of having the students problem solve and think about it, and understand the issue in a complex way, and just continuously weaving that through curriculum and through pedagogy is extremely critical. And I think, I saw this firsthand by a middle school teacher named Susie McGlone, who I've grown quite fond of. And, I visited her class a lot of times. She teaches an 8th grade class at the King School. And, every time she's teaching them about writing, she's also, telling them like, hey, here's what's going on in the district. She shows clips of school committee. She shows clips of city council hearings, and she's teaching about the structure of local government. She's teaching about the issues going on, how their students can get involved. I think those sort of practices are extremely critical.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. I just want to say I love all the update. Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask, does the 100% also include alternative education schools?
Yes, they do. It also includes our alternative ed programs.
That is fantastic. I commend you guys. That's really wonderful. Great job. My favorite is the climate justice. Everything you guys do is great, but that one is just really, I think, so important for the future of our world. And I also want to echo, Ms. Robinson's question, because that was going to be my question about the participation. I think I definitely would love to see, when we return, that there be some kind of hybrid, as just like a single mom. I know that I have been able to participate in a lot more things because of Zoom, which I would not have been able to do. And I've seen that also in our school committee meetings. where people have been able to participate. So being able to have both, like the in-person and that, I think will be really, really important. So thank you again for that question. So thank you again to you and to all of your BSAC colleagues. We really appreciate you guys, all the work that you do. So thank you. And now we're going to move on to general public comment. So I'm going to hand this over to Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver Davila. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents, students, and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but are referred to the superintendent for a later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. We have 32 speakers this evening, so in accordance with school committee policy, time will be reduced to 2 minutes per person, and I'll remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. Those who require interpretation services will receive an additional 2 minutes. To the attendees who are listening to simultaneous interpretation on a different Zoom channel, please move over to the English language channel when the public testimony is being translated from a non-English language. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. Large groups addressing the same topic are encouraged to consolidate their remarks or choose a spokesperson to provide testimony. Written testimony is appreciated and encouraged. Please state your name and affiliation before you begin. When I call your name, please raise your hand virtually in Zoom. Also, please make sure that you're signed into Zoom with the same name that you used to sign up for public comment. And that will allow us to identify you when it's your turn to testify. Our first speaker this evening is Boston City Councilor at Large, Anissa Asabi George, and she'll be followed by Ashley Clerge and Angela Beltran Reyes.
Good evening, members of the school committee and Superintendent Casalius. My name is Anissa Asabi George. I'm an at-large city councilor and chair of the council's education committee. Today at the City Council meeting, I filed a home rule petition for a special law regarding the enfranchising of Boston School Committee student member. This home rule petition is the beginning of what will undoubtedly be a complex and long conversation regarding the structure of the school committee. After a long-standing partnership and many conversations with the Boston Student Advisory Council, I believe that it is long overdue to begin the process to formally enfranchise the student member of the Boston School Committee. Currently, the school committee structure allows for 7 full voting members and 1 student member. The student member is elected, as you know, by the BPS student population through the Boston Student Advisory Council. Tonight, we are joined by Kamani James, who attends every school committee meeting, participates in school committee policy deliberations, and is a public voice representing our actual BPS students, just like his predecessors did before him. In too many ways to describe, the student member contributes enormously to the discussion at the school committee and does the same level of work to prepare for these meetings as full voting members. The main difference between them is that the student member currently does not have the right to vote on the school committee. As an official representative of the student voice, their role is fundamental to making sure our policies are well informed and include the stakeholders directly impacted. As a former BSAC member myself, and as someone who has watched many student members excel and be deeply engaged in the school committee despite not having the right to vote, I am committed to finding a way to make sure that the student member of the Boston School Committee can vote. This home rule petition will certainly be edited and reshaped several times before we vote on it. I look forward to hearing from all of you and the public about your support, concerns, and any additional considerations while we have this necessary conversation. And of course, I will continue to have conversations with Kamani and our youth moving forward, as well as future conversations about how to provide the student representative with the same stipend the other school committee members receive. Finally, I want to take this opportunity to share that we'll be hosting a hearing on Monday, December 7th at 5 p.m. regarding curriculum and the implementation of ethnic studies, and look forward to lots of other things over the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Our next speaker is Ashley Clerge.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Ashley Clerget, and I'm currently a fifth grade teacher in East Boston. I have testified in front of this committee before. However, my voice is not the important voice today. I wanted to amplify and lift my students' voices who will be testifying after me. They have come to me with many concerns that they have over remote learning and hybrid learning, and I told them that the best place to be heard to make change, because their voice is important, is for them to speak in front of this committee. So I present to you some of the best fifth graders in East Boston.
Okay. All right, Ms. Clerch, we're gonna call your students. If you can please raise your hand virtually. Angela Beltran Reyes, Jaisel Correa Nunez, and Christian Avarelo Gonzalez.
Can we call them again?
Angela Beltran Reyes, Jaisel Correa Nunez.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. Angela?
Yes.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Angela, and I'm a fifth grader in East Boston. I'm nervous about going back to school. I think were to start going back to school right now, I would be really hard to do school all day in a mask because some kids make it really hard to breathe and focus on work. Also, the internet at school is really slow, and it would be hard to be hybrid when we are all together. Being in school would not feel like real school because we can't play and with our friends or learn like we used to. We should only go back to school only go to school when we only back to school when things can look kind of normal and we actually be with each other instead of being focused to face one way. We need our school to have all of what we need to be safe, including good cleaning and face protection.
Thank you.
Thank you, great job. Our next speaker is Jaisel Correa Nunez, followed by Christian Aravalo Gonzalez. Is Jaisel or Christian with us?
Hi.
Oh, there we go. Welcome. Go ahead, Christian.
Hi, my name is Christian. I am a fifth grader in East Boston. I wanted to share my concern about the virtual school hours. Most days I log off the computer after 7 hours with my eyes hurting, not able to look at, not being able to focus at anything. Ever since virtual learning started, the problems with my eyes have gotten worse and worse. I think we need at least 1 or 2 hours less of school each day with less time on Zoom. It would help me be more engaged in class. I won't be tired looking at a screen. Also, not everyone has good internet. It is hard to do a class for so long when my internet keeps kicking me out from the class.
Thank you, Christian. Ms. Clares, I don't see Jaisel with us. So we're going to move on to Isabella Amador. She'll be followed by Charlie Kim and Joshua Pierce. If you can please raise your hands virtually in Zoom. Isabella?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Superintendent and the school committee members for allowing me to share my concerns. My name is Isabella Amador. I'm a senior. As the president of EMK Student Council, as well as a member of the Board of Trustees as a student representative. I'm here to talk to you about our urgent need for a safe school for EMK students. The COVID-19 outbreak has changed our world, our communities, and our children. Schools will need to change too. This pandemic, like so many other disasters, has disproportionately impacted community of color and low-income families. EMK families and staff are concerned that returning to school with an inadequate facility is an injustice. Thanks to Boston Public Schools, the Fenwood campus, which houses 9th and 10th grade students, is safe for all students and staff. We thank Dr. Casillas for visiting our 2 campuses in the fall of 2019, and we believe that she will agree that our facility at Northeastern University is inadequate. At the Northeastern campus, there is no ventilation, and carpet and windows need to be replaced. The hallways and the classrooms are not conducive to social distancing or have the appropriate furniture 6 foot apart. Despite all odds, we believe that the district, alongside the EMK community, will do its best to develop a plan that will not jeopardize students and staff safety.
30 seconds.
To avoid further exacerbating the deep inequities in our education system, the EMK community believes that we must start planning now for a new school. You cannot train 21st century health professionals in a 19th century building. We propose that the district looks at the following options: identify and negotiate an appropriate space on their northeastern campus or in the Longwood medical area to house the entire school, grades 9 through 12, creating a combined and unified student body. Increase dual enrollment at Roxbury Community College with EMK Academy students co-housed on campus, and the goal of a new building for EMK on one of the vacant lots along Columbus Avenue. And combine payment in lieu of taxes and non-pilot to invest in a new building on Whittier Street, Crescent Parcel 3, or the Boston Planning and Development Agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Our next speaker is Charlie Kim.
Hello.
Hi, welcome, Mr. Kim.
Hi, good evening. My name is Charlie Kim. I'm a parent of 2 students in BPS. Tonight, the Build BPS team will be presenting, so I want to bring clarity and real transparency to whatever false narrative the Build BPS team will try to pass to the school committee and the public at large. Tonight, Mr. Cooter will tell you the Horace Mann and Jackson Mann are 1, a high priority, 2, a part of Build BPS, and 3, COVID has delayed the planning. The first is a poor use of words that BPS continues to use as it has completely diluted it. High priority is used to offensively categorize our children, along with categorizing condemned school buildings. You can't say high priority if you don't actually do something about it. Precision of language is paramount when dealing with families. Second, our building is a part of Build BPS. That is false, because on slide number 17, it states BPS is seeking funds from MSBA and partnerships. Build BPS has a committed budget of $1 billion. Why does BPS need to seek new funds? Third, COVID has delayed the planning. This is completely false. There is public documentation proving this. The Horace Mann community started formal meetings with Build BPS starting in 2019, including bi-weekly and monthly meetings during this COVID pandemic. In these closed door meetings, some of which were confidential, BPS offered the Edwards Building in Charlestown. The Horace Mann formally wrote to the Build BPS team on September 22nd saying we accept the Edwards Building option as a plan. On November 2nd, Superintendent Casillas said the Edwards can't be committed to the Horace Mann because it's committed to the Charlestown community. So I want to close with a respectful plea to the school committee, members of the Charlestown community, and to elected officials to please restart the conversation where we left off on September 22nd. The Edwards Building is vacant with no plan, but will be a school. Please let this be a viable option for the Horace Mann School for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Our next speaker is Joshua Pierce. He'll be followed by Edith Bazile, Sam Bartle, and Bernadette Tucker. If you can all please raise your hands virtually in Zoom. Mr. Pierce?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi. With all due respect to everyone here, it feels like we're sort of in the twilight zone. The fact that 55,000 students are learning at home, with thousands of learning disabled students being further marginalized, expanding existing inequalities, is being treated as if it's just another line item at a regular Boston School Committee meeting. I haven't heard one question about the reopening plans in New York City to bring younger students back to school. Not one. I also heard Dr. Cassellius gloss over the fact that the Boston Public Health Commission is now using a different rate to calculate positivity in the community. If you look back at the rate that is now being used, it has been well under 4% for the last several months. For some strange reason, we've only switched to using this new rate in the last couple of weeks. So I'm just having a very hard time understanding why you guys cannot convey this information to the public when it's being used to make such consequential decisions for all BPS students, and parents have no idea that this is even going on. At the last meeting, I heard Dr. Cassellius say that she hasn't gotten enough support from the federal government or guidance from the federal government. Are we really waiting on the federal government to give us guidance on how to open schools when there's cities all over the world, including in Europe and Canada, and right down the road in New York City that have now done this successfully? I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around that. So I hope that you guys can continue to focus on this issue primarily above and beyond everything else. The issues at the Mather, the issues with cops in schools, obviously racial equity is a huge issue that needs to be dealt with. But the issue right now is the fact that 55,000 kids are barely getting an education.
Mr.
Thank
Pierce,
you.
thank you for your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Edith Bazile.
On October 21st, 2020, the former chair of the school committee calmly uttered a series of Black names in a racist parody. This was not a mistake. He rattled off these names like he's done it over and over. He was not sorry. He was sorry he got caught. Racism is not harmless. Tolerance, excuses, and lack of action hurts because silence is compliance. Comforting white fragility in the face of racist acts contributes to the dehumanization, dismissal, and invisibility of Black people. So I ask you a series of 5 questions. What will you do? Number 1, money matters when measuring outcomes. In the wake of COVID-19, will you use the equity tool to equitably fund historically underfunded, under-resourced, and understaffed schools and facilities in Black neighborhoods? Number 2, research shows that policing does not lead to safer schools. It makes Black students less safe. Will you confront the school to prison pipeline? How? Defund school police and support student healing during this pandemic with counselors and mental health professionals. 3, Black and brown students face racial profiling, interrogations, and surveillance. Will you eliminate the tyranny of surveillance that violates the rights of Black and brown students in schools? 4, instruction matters. A temporary pause on the racial hoarding of exam schools is not enough. BPS fired highly qualified Black academic leadership with no shared plan for ensuring all students have equitable access to high quality instruction. Where's the plan? Where's the organizational chart? 5, what can you do now? Prioritize in-person learning for all students with high needs, not just those whose families have political capital. Combat racism, be an ally, but don't use your privilege to speak for Black and brown people. We can speak for ourselves. Work with our elected leader, Roxy Harvey, chair of the Boston SPED PAC, representing families of 11,000 students with disabilities across all communities. She worked tirelessly since the initial closure of schools and throughout the year. In summary, achieving equity requires more than lip service. It requires policies that target dollars and resources where needed most. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Sam Bartle, followed by Bernadette Tucker, Corey Zengbot, and Mary Kate Garrity.
Hi there. My name is Sam Bartle, and I am the mom to 2 boys in the Boston Public School System. The reason for my testimony tonight is that school is essential. While my 3rd grader continues to struggle with remote learning and actually told me this morning that he hates school now, I'm here to give testimony today about my kindergartner, Miles. Miles is on the spectrum where he struggles with attention, communication, and social skills. Before this pandemic, he was already behind his peers in many of the basic life fundamentals that many take for granted. Remote learning has only exacerbated these gaps where we are seeing Miles regressing versus progressing in many areas. Gains in social skills and social emotional learning are impossible to achieve in a remote environment. I'm not a trained special educator, speech therapist, or occupational therapist. All services that he needs just to help keep him up with the rest of his peers. It's a daily struggle to get him to even sit at the computer, never mind engage and learn. His losses this year due to remote learning will continue to impact him for the rest of his life. For a city that prides itself on its progressive and equitable values, I'm appalled at where children are falling on its priority list. Boston says it's okay to gamble, drink, and dine in, but kids can't go to school unless you're a family that can afford to send them to a private school or move to a school district that is open. Data continues to show that reopening schools does not meaningfully increase the risk level faced by teachers or students, but keeping them closed is causing tremendous emotional damage to our children and their families. You're failing my sons, failing all the other kids, and failing the families that have decided to raise the children in our communities. I've heard from many of you as well as elected officials that are just heartbroken over what is happening right now. Yet here we are, almost remote for a year. When you look back at this time, will you be able to say with all honesty that you fought for what is right for the kids who need us most? For all BPS students who want to safely return to in-person learning, or were you complicit with not taking a stand to make the children of Boston a priority? In-person public education is essential. Closing the gaps for those who are disadvantaged is essential. My sons are essential. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bartle.
Our next speaker is Bernadette Tucker. I don't see Bernadette in our attendees list. If you can please raise your hand virtually if you're with us, Bernadette Tucker. She'll be followed by Corey Zengbot, Mary Kate Garrity, and Emma Winger. Okay, let's try Corey Zengbot. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Oliver Davila and the other committee members. My name is Corey Zengbot. I'm a resident of Charlestown, where my daughter is a K-1 student at Harvard-Kent. I'm also a member of the now very robust coalition of parents and other caregivers called Voices for BPS Families. As I spoke about at the last committee, we are looking for immediate action on returning our high priority students and littlest learners to school. At this point, nearly 10 months into the pandemic in the US, the data is unambiguous, and public health experts and epidemiologists are unanimous that our youngest elementary school children can safely attend school. Across the US, more districts have begun to prioritize elementary students for in-person learning, a policy already in place in much of Europe. Fauci has been on the major networks advocating for return to school for the youngest and high priority students, and the New York Times has been writing stories near daily. But all we have to show for it in Boston are fewer than 200 HIP students in the classroom. Earlier today, I participated in a protest at City Hall with other parents from across the city and with Massachusetts Parents United, but most importantly, with our children. We use this as an experiential object lesson in civic engagement, something that typically isn't part of the lesson plan for pre-K and kindergarten students, but this we can all agree is an atypical year. We embrace anything that provides an opportunity for safe in-person interaction, something our little learners so desperately need and deserve. I was asked by a reporter on City Hall Plaza today, why wouldn't BPS and the mayor considering bringing back just the younger grades, given the abundance of data now available? My reply, that's the same question I've been asking. It's nonsensical. And every day that high priority students and young students are out of school sets them further and further behind, disproportionately affecting Black and Brown students across the city, given who BPS serves. To me, this seems a lot like institutional racism. Though I'm a white parent who fully acknowledges my white privilege, I am committed to signaling my allyship and advocating for all students who choose to return to school. We ask you, the members of the school committee, as well as other parents from across the city, to sign our change.org petition, School is Essential, resume in-person education in Boston. We are nearing 1,000 signatures just after 48 hours and would love additional support from everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mary Kate Garrity. If you could please raise your hand virtually in Zoom. Mary Kate. Okay, let's try Emma Winger. Emma?
I'm here.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. I'm here because, as others have said, school is essential. I'm a parent of a BPS student in K2 and a member of Voices for BPS Families. With no timeline for when BPS students will return to the classroom, it is striking that parents and the public have been given virtually no information about how remote learning is actually working or not working, as the case may be. There are so many questions. What are attendance rates at each school and in each grade level? How are attendance rates calculated? How many hours of synchronous learning are students actually attending each day? What are the assignment completion rates? More globally, how is BPS evaluating the effect and effectiveness of remote education? Is BPS evaluating the effect and effectiveness of remote education? We saw the survey circulated earlier this week. What else are you doing to check on education of your students? On Tuesday, Voices for BPS Families submitted a records request to the city seeking records and data regarding the effectiveness and effect of remote education in BPS schools. We are building on the work of Counselor Campbell, who our request, we understand, was never responded to. We hope that BPS meets the statutory deadlines and provides us that information promptly. As you have already heard and will hear throughout the night, children and families across the city are suffering under remote education. They deserve transparency regarding that remote education. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speakers are Megan Castro, Ruby Reyes, Sharon Hinton, and Marcy Carmody. Please raise your hands. Is Megan Castro with us? Please raise your hand virtually. Okay, Ruby Reyes. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ruby Reyes. I'm the director of the Boston Education Justice Alliance. Throughout reopening, BPS has worked to turn school communities against one another, from gaslighting teachers by claiming an open window and box fan or adequate air filtration systems, to pitting parents against one another and claiming that high needs are different from students with higher or highest needs. These divisive methods are not what students and families need right now or ever. What we need is a leadership that listens to school communities and advocates for the needs of our students. This is not what's happening. As we prepare for budget season, we've had 9 months of inadequacy. The budget is an opportunity for you to do something right. Each year, schools are pitted against one another in the annual budget season fight for crumbs. Last year's budget promised a $100 million increase, but also included school budget cuts of over $6 million because of enrollment decline. Some of the transformation schools that received additional resources also saw overall budget cuts. This is while a $50 million projected budget was approved to beautify City Hall Plaza. This is also as Boston has 2 of the most expensive zip codes in New England, Beacon Hill and Prudential Center, which have home sales averaging over $33 million. The school budget process is a game of winners and losers. All the while, BPS Central Office thanks themselves for their good work, and school committee members scratch their heads wondering why they have to hear families beg for pennies every year. As we continue to live in a year of crisis, school communities need a moral budget. It's your responsibility as a school committee to pass a budget that actually meets the needs of students. The city charter gives you clear authority to change anything in the superintendent's budget, including adding money. Beige demands the development of a moral budget based on the needs of our school communities rather than based on what the mayor gives us or enrollment decline. Similar to the moratorium on testing for the exam school in face of the pandemic, there needs to be a moratorium on cutting budgets for a school because of enrollment numbers that reflect the pandemic, not school choice. The pandemic cannot be used as an excuse to cut school budgets or continuation of insufficient planning. This sick culture of scarcity has to end. Are you acting on behalf of the mayor or BPS children and families? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Megan Castro has her hand raised now. Megan? Please unmute yourself.
Hi, so sorry.
Oh,
This is
welcome.
Megan. Hi, thanks for having me, and thank you for everyone who's testifying again tonight. I'm a parent in Charlestown of 3 BPS kids, one of who's in the HIPP group. The group that I'm part of had a rally today at City Hall. Over 100 people were there, and all these people had signs and kids had signs. And the one that stuck with me the most said that the kid was holding that they've been out of school for 294 days. We're 9 months into this. September was 3 months ago. The last time I testified at school committee was 2 weeks ago. I have to keep coming back here. The opening plans are not even on the agenda tonight. They're on my agenda every day, all day at our house for the kids that need full-time help to go through virtual learning. And I'm just begging you, I don't know what action has been taken in the last 2 weeks since the last school committee meeting. We all know that New York City schools have closed and then made a plan to reopen in that time. And I'm just begging you to keep this on the forefront of everybody's minds. The fact that people can be at bars and bowling alleys and casinos and restaurants and private schools and charter schools and Catholic schools, but not at public schools in Boston is a travesty. And I just appreciate that being the number one priority of everyone on the committee. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. Our next speaker is Sharon Hinton.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Hinton, parent, educator, and community advocate. I'd like to recognize the hard work of Superintendent Cassellius, members of the Boston School Committee, parents, students, teachers, Mayor Walsh, around safely reopening all the Boston schools for all students. But I'm also saying that I'd like to support, vigorously support, having a voting student representative of BSAC on the Boston School Committee. And I support the Home Rule Initiative of Counselor Anissa Saby-George. I also am calling in to voice my support for prioritizing in-service learning and services for our high-need students, as well as readjusting and reallocating budgetary concerns despite the shortfall, the income shortfall, and we know how Boston public schools are financed. We are looking at the impact of education or the lack thereof, and the access, the lack thereof on our future generations, and that impacts the whole fabric of our communities and our country. So I'm calling to, again, voice my support for a voting member of BSAC on the Boston School Committee, prioritizing in-person services, and also, asking that, and I've been on a lot of these Zoom calls in the Boston School Committee, that all these groups come together. We're supposed to all be concerned about our kids and our students. Sometimes I think that gets lost. So I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and I encourage you guys to keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marcy Carmody. She'll be followed by John Mudd, Barbara Fields, and Reverend Bodrick. If you can please raise your hands virtually in Zoom. Ms. Carmody?
Thank you, Boston School Committee, for allowing me this opportunity to speak. My name is Marcy Carmody. I'm a Boston resident and I have 3 children in BPS schools. I'm a part of an advocacy group, Voices for BPS Families, and we believe school is essential. 2 weeks ago, I testified about my son, who was able to go back to school for 3 weeks, only to be told abruptly he could no longer return. 2 weeks have passed since that testimony, which may seem like a short amount of time, but it's a lifetime for many of us with kids at home, particularly high needs kids. Yesterday, Mayor Walsh said he would love to have schools open, love to have kids in schools. He said the loss of education as a result of kids being out of the classroom is likely pretty detrimental. Mayor Walsh had the opportunity to keep 2,600 high in-person priority kids who chose to return, like my son, in the classroom, but he did not. Many of these kids cannot learn on Zoom, are not getting their services, and they are suffering. We are approaching a year of kids being out of school. Governor Baker is talking about kids going back to school full time. BPS has less than 1% of kids in the classroom. It's a travesty and it's a failure of leadership. On November 24th, Mayor Walsh said that hopefully, as the new year comes, we'll be able to get our kids back in school. He reiterated this on Tuesday. I hope kids can go back to school. Members of my group hope kids can go back to school. Many parents, caregivers, children in Boston hope kids can go back. But none of us is the mayor, and hope is not a plan. Look at the science. Look at the harm being done to children. Make tough decisions to prioritize kids and send them back, Mayor Walsh. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Mudd.
Good evening. I appreciate the detail of the Office of Human Capital report on diversity presented at the last meeting, and especially the increased emphasis on MTEL support, retention, and exit interviews. But I'm also extremely disappointed in the actual results that you reported on diversity. You haven't even met the Garrity Court order for 25% Black teachers for more than a decade, and you'll hear more about that in a few moments. But deeply disappointing to me is that, as far as I could hear, there was no mention of your own publicly stated policy that there should be a match between the diversity of teachers and the diversity of students in BPS. Under this policy, the gaps are much, much greater, more than 10 percentage points for Black teachers, more than 30 percentage points for Latino teachers. Yet to my ears, not one school committee member mentioned this policy, even though this goal was part of the strategic vision of the school committee in 2015, the Opportunity and Achievement Gap policy in 2016, and the superintendent's 2025 strategic plan approved this year. So what does this mean? Are you really serious about this policy? If you are in fact committed, I would ask you to take the following 4 steps. 1, reaffirm publicly that you are committed to the long-term policy of matching the diversity of teachers to the diversity of students. 2, direct the school department to report the gaps in this match between teachers and students, in addition to reporting the Garrity benchmarks. 3, add language diversity explicitly to the match between students and teachers, and direct the department to report on those gaps. And finally, don't continue the kind of self-satisfied pat on the back tone. Please show some urgency and demand that the department move more aggressively on this issue. Ask the superintendent to come back at your first meeting in February or before with a report on the actual race and language gaps, and propose a bolder plan with annual targets and accountability to increase teacher diversity in coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mudd. Our next speaker is Barbara Fields.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Fields. I'm speaking tonight as a resident of the city of Boston. As I watched the school committee meeting on November 18th and observed the update on teacher diversity presentation, I felt strongly that I had to respond to the update. The information was framed so that it misrepresents the level of progress made and places a spin on the information. I appreciate the hard work that the team has done, and I truly commend the team for those efforts. However, I must point out that regrettably, the 2021 hiring update continues to show the lack of any real significant progress to obtain the minimal 25% Black teachers as mandated by the court, despite BPS diversity policies and programs. Given a 2-minute limitation, I will speak solely about Black teachers, the area of continuing violation of the outstanding federal court order. Prior to 2008, Black teachers had reached slightly over 26% of teachers. Shortly thereafter, in 2008, BPS reported 23.9 Black educators. From that time on, BPS has experienced a steady decline. The update on teacher diversity heralds the 2021 year as having the strongest hiring outcomes for the last 7 years, but one must look at the past 7 years. Black teacher overall numbers and percentages have fluctuated up and down for the previous 6 years, significantly decreasing to a low of 20.25%. The figures now of 22.08% is a gain of a 34 additional Black teachers for a 1.24% increase over 7 years. That's just an increase of 0.65% over last year. And I see that I've run out of time, but I'd just like to say one thing, and that is I am really disappointed in the accolades given by the school committee members and the superintendent to this progress. While there is some progress being made, we are so far from reaching the mandate that we have. And I concur with John that we really need to focus on making some substantial gains and to not keep making these incremental increases that really takes us nowhere closer to 25% than we were decades ago. And thank you for allowing me the extra few minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Our next speaker is Reverend Willie Bodrick. He'll be followed by Mike Heichman, Iris Diaz, and Denise Mercedes. If you can please raise your hands virtually. Reverend Bodrick.
Good evening to Superintendent Casillas, to Chair Oliver Davila, as well as the Boston School Committee members. My name is Reverend Willie Bodrick II. I am the chair of the Boston Network for Black Student Achievement, senior pastor-elect of the historic 12th Baptist Church, as well as a member of the Opportunity and Achievement Gap Task Force and a proud member of Roxbury. I'm here tonight to call on you to do better in our efforts to promote diversity for Black teachers in Boston Public Schools. I'm not here to spout more statistics about the lack of progress. There are others who probably can do that better than me. And you have the numbers from the Office of Human Capital report from last meeting. You know that we have essentially made not much progress that is significant over the past decade in achieving the minimal benchmarks that have been established by Judge Garrity nearly 50 years ago of 25%. And these Garrity goals themselves are out of date in a school system that is 33% Black students. We have waited far too long. We've seen far too little progress. We need to see some real action that will produce real results. BPS has an impressive array of partnerships and pipelines, programs that promote diversity, but the number of Black teachers produced by these programs is still far too small and do not make a significant difference in the overall percentages. You know this, I know this, and we cannot be satisfied with this. To be satisfied would be seemingly to be satisfied with some form of tokenism. I and my community are not satisfied. It is time that we break out of this stalemate with some dramatic action. Let's not only think about thinking outside of the box, but let's break out of the box. For example, I sit on the Opportunity and Achievement Gap Task Force. Our policy approved in 2016 called for taking the Accelerated Community to Teachers program to scale. We are coming up on the budget season. Let's see some action on this and other teacher diversity items in the next budget that can begin to make real progress. But more than that, let's see a broad plan that will produce some significant progress for BPS beginning in its next hiring season in 2021. We don't see that strategic operational plan to implement teacher diversity goals in the superintendent's 20 and 25 strategic plan. Let's see it, let's discuss it as a school district and a community. I'm here, I understand I'm out of time. Progress won't be easy, and none of us expect change overnight. And we recognize that people are working hard in this season. but we do not just expect verbal commitments, but a serious demand to school committee and from our superintendent so that we can achieve real progress in teacher diversity over the next years. Thank you very much for your time. And I also want to lift up the name of a great advocate, George Cox, who fought hard on this issue of teacher diversity. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your testimony. I just want to remind everybody that we have 2 minutes per speaker. I really try not to cut people off because I think everybody has something important to say, but I do want to make sure that everybody gets to speak, and I know people have families and dinner, et cetera. So if everybody coming up next could just really stay with your 2 minutes, it would be very, very much appreciated. Thank you in advance.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mike Heichman. Mr. Heichman? You could unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Oh, good. It took me a while to get the box. Okay. Mike Heichman, Dorchester, member of Beja. I support the shift to dual language programs described by the superintendent early in the meeting. I support the home rule petitions so that the student rep can have a vote and call on the Boston School Committee to pass a resolution to support this proposed change to our city charter. I hear the pain of many parents who testifying today that they want children to go back to schools. I know they're sincere with their desire for kids to return to schools. I also want to say there's another side to this, which is safety. I'm 74 years old. My wife is 77 years old. If we return our children to schools, it's going to impact the students will get sick, educational workers will get sick. It will get more virus in the community. Our schools are, most of our schools are unsafe. So I wonder in terms of these parents, if they represent the diversity of our school community or if they represent a small group. I know they're sincere in their opinions, but I don't hear their concern about safety. I'm very pleased at the last meeting and this meeting that there's improved translation services. This should continue. At the last meeting, I expressed concern about the budget for the rest of the year and the next one. I am fearful that will be proposing an austerity budget with deep cuts in services, layoffs, and school closings. Insufficient resources for our children has been a major part of our system of institutionalized racism and class oppression. I know that you're already working on next year's budget. When will there be a report on your plans? Thank you very much.
Thank you for holding your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Heichman. We'll move on now to our speakers who are going to use Spanish interpretation. So I would ask that that attendees who are listening to simultaneous interpretation on a different Zoom channel, please now move over to the English language channel, where the public testimony is being translated from a non-English language. Also, to our speakers, please speak slowly and take frequent breaks to allow for the consecutive interpretation. Ms. Diaz, are you with us?
Okay. Oh, sorry. ¿Me oyen? Ok. Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Iris Díaz. Primeramente, quiero agradecerte por tener interpretación en español simultánea, ya que era algo que nosotros los padres hispanohablantes habíamos pedido hace mucho tiempo. Muchas gracias. Ya sé que abrieron las escuelas para niños ya sé que abrieron 4 escuelas para niños con necesidades especiales y estoy muy contenta. En la escuela Blaston hay muchos casos con necesidades especiales. Quiero citar el caso de María Moura, que tiene un niño con altas necesidades. en silla de ruedas y condiciones que le impiden estar frente de un computador. Casos como este y de otras madres que tienen niños con altas necesidades especiales. Le pregunto al distrito educativo, esta noche, ¿cuál es el plan para esta familia que están desesperados en la casa y que no tienen la capacidad para lidiar con estos niños por sus condiciones? Le pregunto al distrito educativo, sé que están trabajando para abrir otras escuelas enfocado en estos niños con altas necesidades. Le pregunto al distrito, ¿qué plan tienen para la Blaston, tomando en cuenta la estructura de la escuela? Estoy aquí para abogar por esos niños que tienen altas necesidades y que necesitan aprendizaje de acuerdo a su condición. Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
Gracias. Our next speaker is Denise Mercedes. Denise Mercedes. Could our Spanish interpreters please call Ms. Mercedes? Ms. Mercedes, please go ahead. We also have Glenda Torres. Glenda, please go ahead.
Liz Sullivan, have you called the next speaker?
I have. There's a little bit of confusion that the speaker might be speaking on the other channel, so I didn't want to interrupt that, but I will move on to the next speaker. We have Erin Welch, followed by Mano Katsampanakis, Jessica McGovern, and Brittany Hampton. If you can please raise your names virtually. Erin Welch.
Guys, I'm going to go online right now.
Welcome. Ms. Welch?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. Okay. Excuse me, sorry. Sorry, I'm going to have a... All right, well, thank you first of all for this opportunity to participate tonight as always. I'm Erin Welch, BPS parent and a member of Boston Voices for BPS Parents. The purpose of my testimony tonight is to reiterate that school is essential. It's interesting at the beginning of this public testimony portion of this meeting that you asked members of groups to have one speaker provide testimony on behalf of the group. When you hear us, these same parents from the same groups saying the same thing, each time. Sorry, just shuffling a little bit. Saying the same things for hours at each of these meetings. Let this be a metaphor. Our repetitive testimony is the repetitive cries of our children that we parents hear day after day as they suffer through the Zoom day. The families want answers to questions that we've been asking for months. I'll read just a few of them, but please keep in mind that these are not hypothetical questions. We want answers to these questions. And I think at this point, after so long of having remote learning, that we're entitled to have some of these answers, which I've submitted on numerous occasions to different authorities. So one question is, by what criteria did you decide it was safe to return only 200 students to 4 schools? What COVID statistics exactly? How did you decide which students? How did you decide which schools? How did you decide how many students or the ratio of students to teachers? Massachusetts law guarantees a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment to all school-age children, regardless of disability. Currently, only children in Boston who are receiving an appropriate education are those with the financial resources to pay tuition for private education. Is this acceptable? Yes or no? Have you researched Boston's private schools to learn what operational model the BPS schools can use to open for in-person learning 5 days a week, like the private schools? What exactly are the barriers to opening the schools to more students? Are the teachers willing to return to school? Where is the Boston Teachers Union? Where is Mrs. Tang?
Ms. Welsh, your time is up. I appreciate your important testimony. If you could just finish, I'd appreciate
Sure,
it.
I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Mano Katsoumpanakis.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm sorry. Good evening. My name is Mano Katsoumpanakis. I have 2 children in BPS, one of which is a high priority student, and I am part of what is rapidly becoming a very large group of parents, Voices for BPS Families. Today marks the 27th school day since you told my son that he couldn't go to school anymore. Today, I am again giving a testimony because, like the 100 parents and children that stood in front of City Hall a few hours ago, and the over 800 that signed our petition in the last 48 hours, I believe the school is essential. Unlike you, Dr. Caselius, what I'm looking forward to is high priority kids to return to school, not the winter break. This is urgent. When 27 school days ago, you told my son and 1,500 other kids that school was closing, you told them that gambling is more important than them. You told them that dining in the waterfront is more important than them. You told them the kids that can afford a private school are more important than them. 2 weeks ago, you referred to Mr. Locontos's racist comments as a lapse of judgment that cannot and should not erase all of his years of supporting equitable education. Those are your words, Madam Chair. I'm afraid that a year from now, someone will say the same about you. Someone will say that despite your impressive resumes, and they sure are impressive, your achievements were shadowed by your lack of action during the pandemic of 2020. Don't let that happen. Act now and join us. Start by signing our petition. You too, Mr. James, if you're still listening. And to answer something that Mr. Heinzman said a few minutes ago about our group, we do not promote every single student to return, only the ones that want to return. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jessica McGovern.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jessica McGovern, and I'm speaking tonight because I think school is essential. I cannot imagine a more important topic than a plan to reopen schools for those who want to attend in person to be discussed tonight by this school committee and leaders of the Boston Public Schools. I am a parent of 2 BPS students, a pediatrician, and wife to a non-public high school teacher who is teaching in person 4 days a week. It is clear now that schools are safe to open using masks, social distancing, and staying home when sick. I'm sure you are all familiar with the American Academy of Pediatrics guidance from the summer on school opening and keep up to date on the daily data that comes from around this country and the world on in-person learning. We know that young children and children with disabilities cannot learn remotely. On a personal level, my first grade son cries frequently, hates Zoom school, and is never actually on Zoom, but is toggling between several websites at all times. He hasn't learned anything since last winter. My daughter's in 3rd grade. She seems to be doing her work, but she is a zombie on a screen all day. I can see her old self come out every so often, and it breaks my heart to see my children lose their excitement for learning. All children are suffering. Enrollment in BPS is down. Efforts to improve inequities in our society are being shattered by the ability to get an in-person education or not. And that right now, that has to do with whether your family can afford a private school tuition. These schools are open. Furthermore, it is developmentally inappropriate for children to be spending this much time on screens and having virtually no social interaction or recess. As a pediatrician, I am seeing more mental health visits than I have ever seen in 15 years of practice. I implore those that are in power in Boston to do the right thing. Follow science, advocate for children. They are our future. School is essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Brittany Hampton, followed by Melanie Allen, Stephen Van Dyke, and Sarah Parker. If you could please raise your hands virtually in Zoom. Ms. Hampton?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having me and allowing us to speak. My name is Brittany Hampton, and I'm a resident of Charlestown. My son Jack is in K2 at the Elliott School learning remotely, while his 4-year-old brother is at a private nursery school down the street from the Elliott, learning in person 5 days a week since September. Last week, the Globe reported that public school enrollment across Massachusetts dropped by nearly 4% this fall, a clear signal that many families have pulled their children out of public schools. The steepest decline came in the lowest grades as families have opted to keep their children enrolled in private school programs, even if it means delaying kindergarten for a year. Kindergarten enrollment decreased by nearly 12%, and public pre-kindergarten enrollment is down 30%. Those two grade levels combined represent almost half of the overall enrollment decline statewide. We know that early education is one key aspect of closing the achievement gap. In BPS, K1 and K2 spots are coveted as families want to have their children benefit from high quality early education, present party included. However, due to the lack of planning and concern for our littlest learners, we now have BPS schools that are struggling to fill these seats. BPS schools that had wait lists 80 families long in the spring now have seats open in their K1 and K2 programs. Districts across the state and country are prioritizing in-person learning for those families who opt for in-person learning for our youngest learners. I ask that BPS do the same and commit to getting these children back to in-person learning in January. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Melanie Allen.
Hi, I'm a teacher at the Hernandez. I'm a mom at the Roosevelt. I'm also a Hyde Park resident where even when you change how you measure it, COVID rates still top 7%. We have heard from a lot of families tonight who want to get kids back to school. So I want to talk about the people who aren't here tonight. People like the city residents who don't heed advice to stay home. And why would they? When casinos and restaurants remain open, they can't see their families? Of course they saw their families. They gathered over Thanksgiving and we're just now beginning to see the effects that that is having on our COVID rates. I know that in the past 3 days, I have learned of 10 new cases in 4 different households, and that is just among the people I work with directly. I don't know how many other cases there are in our school community. I don't know how many other cases there already are in the rest of BPS. I know that my students and my colleagues and their families are homesick with COVID right now. So they're not here tonight. Dr. Casilius, you've said that buildings don't make people sick, and you're right. It is people who get each other sick. When students talk, their masks slip down and they fix it with their hands on the exposed part because they're not healthcare providers, they're kids. When an asymptomatic carrier is in a room for 6 hours with other people, the building can be as healthy as you want. The virus will spread. I urge you not to roll out more in-person learning until we know the effect this holiday has had on COVID spread. And I want to end by speaking directly to the parents who testified here tonight. I am the mom of a child on the autism spectrum with a full inclusion IEP. It is heartbreakingly difficult to watch how he is suffering in remote learning. And you said it's worth it to get kids like my son back to school. I'm saying it's not. It's not worth someone else's health. It's not worth it for someone else's life. Your child's education is not worth more than another BPS's student's life, not their mother's life, not their grandmother, not their teacher, not the custodian, not a bus driver. A horrible year of school is not worth more than a lifetime. School is important. Breathing is essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephen Van Dyke. Mr. Van Dyke?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to provide testimony because I believe that school is essential and because I'm so disheartened by the disparity between the experience that parents and students are having and the messaging that I hear from the Boston Public School System. I commend all the parents who are here tonight and all the speakers who highlighted what their experience has been like for themselves and for their children. If it doesn't shake you and rattle your bones thinking about the inequities in education right now in our society's priorities, then I don't know what else would. When you have so many things open while schools are closed in a school district in which communities of color are the ones who are asked to make sacrifices. You hear the tone from the parents tonight, and it's so different from the tone that I hear from the Boston Public School System. And I'd ask that there be a greater sense of urgency, because it's not just that online learning is less adequate or less good, it's that it's actively harmful. It's actively harmful for kids that are regressing and not learning. I don't know whether or not my son, who's in kindergarten in the Boston Public School System, is going to have to go a year without going to school. I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of my son. He was out at City Hall today, along with other members of Voices for BPS Families. And he was there to raise his voice for what's right. I listened to Christian talk tonight and other students that are so courageous. I challenge you to be as courageous as my son, Henry. I challenge you to be as brave as Christian, who spoke tonight. I know that you are where you are because of how willing you have been in your careers to say that something is wrong when it's wrong. The inability for students to choose to come back is wrong. And I challenge you to say so. And I challenge you to do so with urgency. We need that urgency from you. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Van Dyke. Our next speaker is Sarah Parker.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Sarah Parker. I'm a Boston resident. I have a 5th grade student, 2nd grade student, and K2 student who attend Boston Public Schools. I know school is essential. It is within your duty as a member of the governing board for Boston Public Schools to protect the students of BPS, and you are completely off mark. I've listened to all recent school committee meetings and have heard you all personally express your unwavering commitment to equality for all students. But at the same time, you've taken a back seat and are spectating as the biggest equity and education gap this city has ever seen is being created. Every day the doors are closed to BPS schools, all children, but more importantly, disadvantaged children, whether through disabilities or socioeconomic factors, move to the back of society's line. The miscommunication, the lack of transparency, the lack of urgency, the lack of a plan to get kids back to school is alarming. The fact that return to school is not even on the agenda tonight is criminal. Members of the committee, you should be putting every effort forward to work with the mayor, the superintendent's office, and BPU to make this happen. Where are the emergency funds that were received? Where is the contingency plan? I've listened to all of you talk for hours about things that won't even matter when you have to deal with the social, emotional, and educational ramifications of long-term remote learning. It's been 9 months. Other than the obvious issues with remote learning, isolation and anxiety are frightening. I know for a fact middle school students in our schools are being hospitalized for suicide attempts. Students are not showing up and haven't been seen for weeks. Students are having breakdowns. Students are being forced to turn on cameras in situations that are uncomfortable or unsafe for them. Reports of domestic violence and child abuse is on the rise. Children are being propelled further into material because it's considered within the curriculum, not because they have the knowledge or skill level, further widening the equity gap. Personally, as a mother of 3 school-age children, as an advocate for kids, this is what I have to say. However, I fear what I say will fall on deaf ears. So here's a list of articles which I will email to all of you, publicized with evidence, facts, and figures that prove schools are not super spreaders. 2, the risk of mental health and developmental issues far outweighs the risk of contracting coronavirus at school. Mass Education Commissioner, fears of super spreading.
Your time is up. If you want to email those to us, we will definitely.
Yeah, I have a whole entire list of all these articles that basically all the science backing up saying that, you know.
Please email those to us. We will
I
read.
will, absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Glenda Torres is still with us. She had signed up for the Spanish interpretation earlier, and we had some technical difficulties. So Juan or Luz, would you please support Ms. Torres in her testimony?
I'm here. This is Glenda Torres.
Hi, welcome.
Sí, no sé si me van a dar la interpretación. Puedo empezar. ¿Me dicen? Perfecto. Buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Glenda Torres, madre de 5 hijos, la cual 3 de mis hijas todavía asisten a las escuelas públicas de Boston. La más pequeña tiene 10 años. La más pequeña va a la escuela Blackstone. Ella atiende el 5º grado. Ella atiende el 5º grado y tengo la suerte que mi hija tiene unos maestros excelentes. Pero el motivo de yo estar aquí es que veo con gran preocupación las estructuras de la escuela Blackstone. La escuela fue construida para el año 1975 y tiene más de 500 estudiantes. Es una gran tristeza ver que los niños de la escuela Blackstone tienen una biblioteca en el aire. Con esto quiero decir que no tiene puertas y paredes. Y en la misma situación se encuentran algunos salones de clases. Yo recuerdo que hace 2 años habíamos recibido la noticia de que la ciudad había aprobado $5 millones. Para la escuela Blackstone, el cual fue por el gran esfuerzo y dedicación que hizo un grupo de padres de St. Stephen's y otras escuelas que nos apoyaron para esta propuesta. Fue tanta la emoción y la felicidad que sentimos que compramos un pastel y así celebramos con los padres, maestros y estudiantes este gran logro. Pero ha pasado el tiempo y no hemos visto cambios en la escuela. Por este motivo, con todo respeto, quiero pedirle a este comité escolar que lo tomen en cuenta y le den seguimiento. En nombre de mi hija y de todos los estudiantes de la Escuela Blaston, que se merecen lo mejor y en especial en este tiempo de pandemia, que ha sido difícil para todos. Espero que mi voz sea escuchada. Muchas gracias por su valioso tiempo y por darme la oportunidad de poder expresarme. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Ms. Oliver Davila. Oops. Thank you, Juan. Ms. Oliver Davila, that concludes our speakers for general public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. So our first action item tonight is grants for approval totaling $794,115. And I would now like to open it up for any questions or comments from the committee. Okay, if there are.
I have one
Oh, you
question.
have one. Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Can somebody just explain to me what is the EdFi Operation Data Store? We had a grant about that, but I wasn't quite sure what that was.
EdFi, okay. Is her interpretation still on? EdFi is a data storage and kind of an interface. Probably Mark Racine can talk about the technology better, but it is it's for our data and our technology, and for us to be able to integrate technology, different technology systems, so that they can all integrate into a data storage bank.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, if there's no further questions, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the grants as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Okay, Ms. Sullivan, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Coleman,
Yes.
Dr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Oliver Davila.
Yes.
The grants are approved unanimously.
Thank you. Our next action items are two collective bargaining agreements between the Boston School Committee and the Boston Association of School Administrators and Supervisors, also known as BASIS. You'll recall that Jeremiah Hassan, Director of the Office of Labor Relations, presented these agreements to the committee at our November 18th meeting, along with a request for an FY21 supplemental appropriation in the amount of $1,857,220. And I will now open it up to the committee if there are any final questions or comments. Okay, if there are no further questions, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Boston School Committee and the Boston Association of School Administrators and Supervisors from September 1st, 2016 through August 31st, 2018, as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a second? Dr. Rivera, thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Coleman,
Yes.
Dr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Oliver Davila.
Yes.
Motion is approved unanimously.
Great, thank you. And I will now entertain a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Boston School Committee and the Boston Association of School Administrators and Supervisors from September 1st, 2018 through August 31st, 2020, as presented. Thank you, Dr. Rivera. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there any discussion or objection to this motion? Okay, Ms. Sullivan, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Coleman,
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
Dr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Ms. Oliver Davila.
Yes.
The motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you. Our final action item tonight is an FY21 supplemental appropriation request to support the collective bargaining agreements between Boston School Committee and BASIS in the amount of $1,857,220,000. And I will now entertain a motion to approve the FY21 supplemental appropriation request as presented. Thank you, Dr. Rivera. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there any discussion or objection to this motion? Ms. Sullivan, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Coleman,
Yes.
Dr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill, Ms. Oliver Davila.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Our first and only report tonight is a Build BPS update. And at this time, I would like to ask the superintendent to give any introductory remarks as well as introduce the team that will be presenting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to introduce Mr. Cooter in just a moment, who will share with you just some general updates as we begin to relaunch the work of Build BPS in earnest. We have, as Charlie Kim said, been talking and doing some engagement around some of the items of Build BPS, but in order to give you a broader general sense of our timeline, where we're headed, we're just giving you kind of a quick outlook of some of the projects that were pretty much in the hopper prior to my arrival to Boston Public Schools. And some of the projects that we need a formal vote on so that we can move forward for our school choice season in the next several weeks here. And then we will take a deeper dive when we are retreating, as we align it to the budget and our strategy as we move forward and pivot toward a more strategic direction and becoming an anti-racist organization and school district with our training on the 9th and also the deeper retreat on the 12th as we look at our outlook for the future as we return strong and recover and reimagine BPS. So Nate, I'm going to give it over to you.
Great, thank you, Superintendent. And as I just get the screen up in front of me, I want to make sure I have everything I need. Good evening, Chair Oliver Davila and members of the school committee. I'm joined this evening by Monica Roberts, our Chief of Student, Family, and Community Advancement.
Nate, your notes are up instead of your screen.
Oh, interesting. How about, well, that's going to be, you're going to get the headline before I get the chance to read it and not hear my emphatic tone. I wanted to introduce first to Monica Roberts, as well as Brian McLaughlin, our Director of Capital Planning. Tonight, we're going to be walking you through an update. As the superintendent mentioned, our update this evening is focused on projects that had begun prior to COVID. We had last come to the school committee in November of 2019 to talk about projects that were being accelerated. And this is our first opportunity to update you. We had intended to come to you in April with a more ambitious timeframe, and that unfortunately has been disrupted. But tonight we're going to be walking you through the projects that were active and underway. The first statement I always open with is one from the Opportunity and Achievement Gap Policy. And it's I'm going to be doing a number of presentations with you over the next few months around the operating budget, around the capital budget, and of course this presentation on Build BPS. And I often start with this because it's important for us to recognize and redouble our efforts to close opportunity achievement gaps, and none more important than the work we do in Build BPS. And so our vision is to put the students who need public education the most at the center of planning, and then begin
to design around them and make sure that the system works best for them. Build BPS, of course, is a core part of our strategic plan. Commitment 4, priority 4 is to implement Build BPS to ensure equitable pathways and connectors between schools. And the way that we think about the Build BPS projects are in 5 major categories. The reason that we think about these categories and organize them this way is sort of twofold. The first, it signals to the community the size and scope of the projects. And it also gives people a sense of the timeline that it takes from once we decide to do a project to when the project is completed. So at the top is, of course, new builds and expansions, our most significant projects that take anywhere from 4 to 8 years to complete in construction, all the way down to capital repairs, which are things that we do on an annual basis, and projects that could be completed, some of which just over the course of a summer. Tonight's focus is going to be on 3 different sections. You're going to see us kind of categorize this. The first section that I want to introduce, Brian McLaughlin, is going to talk about our active construction projects. These are the big initiatives that have been moving forward. This is the first time I've gotten to, I think, introduce Brian to the school committee. Brian joined us on March 9th, and we had about 2 meetings in person about Build BPS before obviously moving into a remote meeting schedule. But I'm going to turn things over now for him to walk us through some of the active projects.
Nate, thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the school committee. As Nate mentioned, I'm going to be presenting on some of the active projects ongoing in Build BPS. The first slide represents 3 of the major builds that are ongoing, that are in design or in construction. The first being the Boston Arts Academy. As you may be aware, the Boston Arts Academy provides access to college preparatory arts, academic education to a diverse student body of 460 students in a full inclusion program for grades 9 to 12. The building is currently in construction. It replaces the former school, which was originally designed as a garage that housed postal vehicles and was renovated in the 90s into a high school. The Boston Arts Academy had lived in that building since 1990. It did not have an auditorium or appropriate spaces to support an art school. The design of the new building includes the ability to accommodate upwards of 500 students, so there'll be a small increase in the student population of the school. It will support all academics in the 5 art majors: theater, dance, music, design, and visual arts, along with fashion technology. In addition to the typical classrooms and science labs required at any high school, the new BAA will feature a 500-seat auditorium with a proscenium stage in a scene shop, a 200-seat black box theater, 4 new dance studios, visual art studios, a recording studio, a choral room, and a 150-seat recital hall. The new building will be 5 stories, just over 150,000 square feet. It will have a freight elevator that will be large enough to accommodate a grand piano. There will be a 5th floor roof terrace designed for use as an outdoor classroom and performance space. The project will also modify the existing streetscape across from the backside of Fenway Park, widening sidewalks, shortening crosswalks, and adding trees and street furniture for a more welcoming experience as students enter the building. The cost of this project is just over $124 million, and we'll be receiving upwards of $48 million in reimbursement from the Massachusetts School Building Authority for this project. You'll see the top picture on this slide is a rendering of what the future Boston Arts Academy will look like. Second major project, which is currently in design, is the Josiah Quincy Upper School. That the rendering of this project is in the lower left. The JQS is a 6 to 12 middle high school that offers an international baccalaureate program. This requires a full range of academic, social, cultural, and physical education programs. The current building that houses the Josiah Quincy Upper School is referred to as the Lincoln Building. It was built in 1911. Although the building has seen some small renovation projects to support new technology and address accessibility issues, it has seen no major projects in the last 50 years. The facility's lighting, fire alarm systems, accessibility above the first floor, signage, toilet rooms, and academic specialty spaces are lacking and do not meet city standards. Most importantly, the building does not have appropriate spaces for the school to deliver its desired educational program. The school lacks a library and media center, does not have a gymnasium, and the classrooms are not designed to support 21st century learning. There are modular classrooms that provide an additional 20,000 square feet of basic classroom and office spaces, but again, they do not have the specialty spaces to support the school. Excitingly, today, the City Council voted to support an appropriation that will that appropriates $193 million to support the construction of this project. The project was moved forward back on October 28th by a vote of the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And today the City Council again took the second vote to appropriate funds to support the construction of this project. We'll likely see upwards of $54 million in reimbursement for the state on this project. Construction will start this summer, and the school will be complete for the 2024 school year. The new JQUS will be a 6-story middle high school with an increase of enrollment to 650 students for grades 6 to 12. The design of the new building will emphasize flexibility, collegiality, and collaboration amongst student and staff. The new state-of-the-art school will have 21st century learning spaces for music, art, and science. It will have a full-size gymnasium, auditorium, media center, and cafeteria. In addition, there will be an outdoor rooftop learning space that will include photovoltaics, native plantings, and the introduction of a school garden that will promote active learning about the environment. The building's mechanical and electrical systems and the selection of durable building materials will support the City of Boston Public Schools sustainability initiatives. And the new school will have an enhanced HVAC system that will address all outside air concerns with the location adjacent to the Massachusetts Turnpike. The final large major build is the Carter School. For those of you who know the school, you're aware of the amazing students and staff of the Carter. This school is located on the border of Boston's Lower Roxbury and South End neighborhood. The existing building was built in the 1970s as a temporary facility. The students at the Carter School range in age from 12 to 22. The students present both severe, intensive disabilities and complex health needs. Due to these unique challenges, each classroom is composed of 5 students, 1 teacher, 2 teaching assistants. The school's current classrooms have been retrofitted to best serve the student population. However, this school was not designed for students with multiple disabilities. The existing building layout does not allow the staff to deliver the full education program as desired. The project is very early in the stages of design, and the architectural firm of Perkins & Will has worked very closely with Mark O'Connor, principal of the Carter School, and his in the Carter School community to identify how the design of a future school will support the Carter School's needs. We do know the future Carter School will be able to expand the program to serve special needs students starting at age 3 through 22. Currently, as I mentioned, they start serving students at the age of 12. New building will not be the typical school, but will have features similar to a healthcare facility. The design of the new building will include flexible spaces, wide hallways, music therapy rooms, appropriate physical education space, a therapeutic pool, and conference rooms for meeting with families and staff, which is extremely important for this school's student population. In addition to the therapeutic spaces, the project will replicate the Carter School's current therapy garden, which is very near and dear to the school and their community's heart. If you could go to the next slide, Nate. One of the smaller projects that BPS is working on is updating the drinking water and drinking fountains throughout the BPS inventory. BPS currently provides safe, clean drinking water at all BPS building locations through bottled water and drinking water fountains. Boston Public Schools is a recent recipient of a $6.2 million grant under the US EPA's Reduction in Lead Exposure via Drinking Water Program. This grant, matched by the mayor's capital investment, will be used to install and test 1,400 filtered bottle refill stations across the 87 BPS buildings that use bottled water as their sole source of drinking water. In 2016, BPS passed the BPS Drinking Water Access Policy, demonstrating its readiness for this grant. Since that time, BPS has successfully piloted this initiative at 17 schools, has implemented rigorous testing and communication requirements, updated the policy, and created a new procedural document in 2019 to meet stricter federal and state guidelines, and won Mass DEP's 2018 Systems Taking Action to Reduce Lead Award. BPS believes this new investment will provide a cleaner, healthier school environment and improve equitable drinking water access for students, families, and staff in our schools and community. This initiative will also help the district continue to meet state and federal guidelines, promote health, reduce environmental impacts, and accommodate school preference for filtered bottle refill stations. Next slide, Nate. Another effort underway is the My Way Cafe, which updates schools, kitchens, and cafeterias throughout the district. We're in the third year of construction and implementation of My Way Cafe. To date, 90 plus school kitchens have been transformed to support My Way Cafe food programs. Costs associated with the work on these renovations is over $18 million. My Way Cafe presents a dramatic shift from schools serving prepackaged meals. My Way Cafe schools, the kitchens are transformed into miniature full-service cafeterias with serving lines, high-quality food, and most importantly, a new element of choice for students. The final phase of My Way Cafe will start design of the remaining 25 to 30 schools in the coming weeks, and we anticipate going into construction for these remaining schools in the summer of 2021. So in September 2021, these kitchens will be online and will be able to support the My Way Cafe food delivery system. Next slide, please. Finally, one additional program or projects that I'd like to touch upon is the bathroom upgrades that are occurring throughout BPS. The mayor's included $10 million to support bathroom upgrades over the next 3 years throughout BPS schools. These upgrades will focus on updating fixtures, partitions, lighting, painting, and floors within bathrooms that are in need of repairs. There's currently 28 toilet room renovations in construction, representing close to $1 million worth of work. Soon after the first of the year, an additional 86 toilet rooms will begin renovation. And we're identifying a group of schools that will go into construction in the summer of 2021 for an additional round of upgrades to another set of BPS schools.
The next section that we're going to be talking about today includes grade configurations. And this also represents the two items that we're asking you to take action item and school committee votes on at the next meeting in 2 weeks. Per the school committee's vote on May 22nd in 2019, we're working to simplify our grade configurations in Boston to create two primary pathways: K-6 schools aligned to 7 to 12 high schools, and K-8 schools aligned to 9 through 12 high schools. During that meeting, we also presented on the merger of the Boston Community Leadership Academy in Hyde Park and the McCormick Middle School in Dorchester. And then finally, at our November 2019 update, which I referenced earlier, we discussed K-6 expansion, particularly in East Boston, and the accelerated timeline for reconfiguring the Edwards Middle School. Before we talk about the specifics of the project, of the two projects, I wanted to refer to information that we've published before on the rationale for phasing out our standalone middle schools. This information has been included in our previous Build BPS reports and in our prior updates to the school committee. One point I wanted to revisit in particular is the impact of family choice and enrollment patterns on our standalone middle schools. As of school year 17-18, the year on which the phase 2 report was based, enrollment in standalone middle schools had declined by nearly 1,800 students over the prior 6 years. As of this year, enrollment has declined in our standalone middle schools by nearly 2,500 students over the last 9 years. In May 2019, we formally launched a planning process to merge BCLA, the Boston Community Leadership Academy, and the McCormick Middle School. While we've had some disruption in the planning, we are ready to bring with you an updated plan for providing much needed clarity to both school communities. We are asking that you take the vote that allows us to formally merge the two schools. From the student and teacher experience, this is a merger. All students will be automatically enrolled in the new 7 through 12 high school, and we're merging the two school staffs together for the new 7 through 12 high school. However, to move forward, we need the school committee to vote officially to close one of the two schools. I also want to note that we're beginning the process of moving the school community into the McCormick School building. And next year, the plan is for that the McCormick Middle School will have, that middle school site will house the 7th through 9th grades. This means that the current McCormick students will stay in their current building as they move up from 6th to 8th grade to 7th through 9th grade. The school's 10th through 12th grade will remain at the Hyde Park complex for one more year, at the school year 21-22. And then we'll move at the start of school year 22-23. This phase move allows us to complete more renovation projects to ready the building to become a high school, and to limit the number of students who will be asked to move from the Hyde Park Education Complex where they're enrolled now to the Columbia Point campus of the BCLA McCormick 7 through 12. There's still a lot of work to be done to successfully launch the BCLA McCormick 7 through 12. And I would be remiss if I didn't specifically thank Mary Driscoll, the school superintendent, and Will Thomas, the current head of school for both BCLA and New Mission. I also want to take a moment to thank the design team. This is a group of smart and dedicated educators from both of the schools who are helping to problem solve and, when necessary, of course, keep me in line. You can expect to see more details about this capital plan for the McCormick or the Columbia Point School site when we present our FY22 capital plan in the beginning part of next year. And while we are referring to BCLA McCormick 7 through 12, which is what families will see when they go to choose the new school for the next school year, we will be launching a formal renaming process per the school committee policy. The other major update that we want to present to you tonight is about the Edwards Middle School. As you know, the Edwards currently educates students in 7th and 8th grades, and we are preparing to close the Edwards at the end of this school year. Closing a school is never an easy process. Our goal is to ensure that all students currently enrolled in the Edwards will have the opportunity to transition to a new school where they'll have as good or better of an educational experience. For the current 8th graders, this is a planned transition as they would have exited the 6th through 8th middle school anyway, and they will enter the choice with other 8th graders during this school choice season in a few months. For the current 7th graders, we are adding a 7th and 8th grade program to Charlestown High School to give them the opportunity to move as a cohort and stay in the neighborhood. For those that do not want to transition to Charlestown High School, we will also be giving them a priority in the assignment rounds that will allow them to choose to enroll in one of the area K-8 schools, including the McKay and Umana in East Boston, for those students from East Boston who want to enroll closer to home. For the staff, Larissa Doherty, the Edwards principal, and Tommy Welch, the school superintendent supporting the Edwards Middle School, have already begun to take steps to support them during this closure. They're setting up demonstration lessons so that high school heads of schools and other school leaders will be able to come into their classroom and observe instruction. And they're using staff development time to not only focus on ending this year strong, but also to be able to provide supports to teachers and help them identify their next teaching position within BPS. Two commitments from the district regarding the Edwards is first, that we are committed to continuously evaluating this plan, especially the plans for student and staff support using the racial equity planning tool. The second commitment is that, as the superintendent mentioned already, that we are planning to use the Edwards Middle School as the Edwards building as a school. And we will begin a public discussion in the beginning of next year on the future use of this building, with the goal of having a plan in place when the school closes in June. The final updates are related to priorities for the remainder of this school year. As I mentioned at the start, we had planned to present an update in April that covered our ambitious slate of projects, including the announced closure of all of our standalone middle schools and greater expansion of K-6 elementary schools and 712 secondary schools. Unfortunately, the presentation didn't happen and our plans needed to be scaled back. And as a result, we've narrowed our focus and prioritized for the key projects where we have made public commitments, 3 of which, of course, I've already discussed. I need to apologize and note that an earlier version of this presentation, which was used as the basis for the translated versions that will be posted, had inadvertently left the Jackson Man off of the list of FY21 priorities that's at the bottom here. Both the Horace Mann and Jackson Man, dealing with the building emergency in Alston-Brighton, is one of our priorities for this year, as well as these 4 other projects that are listed on this slide. For the Horace Mann, the big update in this category has to do with the planned transition out of their current building. We had originally announced that the Horace Mann would stay in the Jackson Man complex through the end of this school year and would move into swing space for the beginning of next school year. The plan is now being reevaluated, and we will plan to keep the Horace Mann in the building until the end of the next school year, until June 2022. The investments that we made, most notably in the air handling system, which was the big concern around the Jackson Man and Horace Mann facility, were originally planned so that they could withstand and keep the building open for 3 or 4 years. So we are not at risk of a building emergency causing us to have to change this timeline again. We are still working with the same urgency to change and find swing space, but we are not as concerned about the air handling system as we were when we first announced this. The other big concern for many in the community, we've had multiple conversations with the Horace Mann community about this, is of course the roof, and we continue to invest to maintain and fix and repair problems that we have with the roof. Our plan, of course, is twofold. First, we need to identify swing space for the Horace Mann School so that they can move into it. But we also want to, and the reference to the MSBA here, is that we want to begin the process for a new state-of-the-art building for our Horace Mann community and partnering with the MSBA. When we announced the $1 billion 10-year Build BPS plan, there was always a commitment to have MSBA resources as part of that $1 billion. We estimated at the time 270 million of the $1 billion would be MSBA. So this is consistent with our messaging around the MSBA and the total $1 billion investment. The Jackson Man update is similar in that the timeline has been changed, so they will be in the building through the end of next year. We are working with Lihia Noriega Murphy to identify and design with her the long-term plan for the school and the students who are enrolled there. Today, we launched another survey with the school community so that they can provide us feedback and let us know what options they would like us to explore as we begin that plan. And we will go back to that community on December 15th to do another presentation and conversation with them around this project. And for the next section on dual language, I'm going to hand it off to Monica Roberts, our Chief of Engagement and Family Advancement.
Thank you, Nate. Good evening, everyone. So just a little bit, you've heard some about the our work with our linguistic communities around the dual language programs. The Office of English Learners has been engaging with 2 of the communities that have sought to access programs through the LOOKT Act, specifically the Vietnamese and Cabo Verdean communities. This started in the summer of 2016. The district launched a Vietnamese dual language committee. And that committee, I will say that a committee was launched and they invited the Office of English Learners to support them in understanding the opportunities available for English learners and Vietnamese students in the BPS. That committee was made up of BPS parents, BPS alumni, members of the Vietnamese community, primarily in the Dorchester area of Boston. Over the next 2 years, the committee met with the Office of English Learners monthly. They visited BPS dual language programs and learned also from other districts. The committee has hosted 3 large community events and multiple information sessions with parents and members of the Vietnamese community, as well as BPS stakeholders as they begin to make their request to BPS to open up a dual language program. In this last school year, 1920, BPS launched 2 UPK K1 classrooms and a K2 classroom at Viet 8, which housed the program. The committee supported that effort. They continue to meet monthly as well and have launched a teacher work group to support the work in the K2 classroom that is currently residing at Viet 8. The work with the Cabo Verdean community started in the 2015-2016 school year when they submitted a request for a Cape Verdean Criollo dual language program. They had over 100 signatures in support of this. In April 2020, a committee was formally launched. That committee has met up to twice a month from April to July of this year. The committee's goals were to launch a heritage program for the 2020-2021 school year, so that is this school year, and to plan for a K1 classroom for the 2021-22 school year. As was shared at the last meeting, a heritage course is going to be piloted at the Burke High School starting in January with the vision of growing the options so that students on the path to earn the seal of biliteracy. The Office of Student and Family and Community Engagement and the Office of English Learners are going to collaborate on ongoing engagement with the Vietnamese and Cabo Verdean communities, as well as this would include not just the school communities, but also the broader communities in regards to the dual language programs. The Vietnamese dual language community is currently meeting every other Monday. The Cabo Verdean community meeting is the next one will be held in December, and we'll be providing an update on the work that is planned for the Burke and for the K1 classroom. More broadly, as a district, we are going to plan engagement opportunities around the programmatic options available through the LOOKT Act in partnership with the Office of English Learner. We hope to start to build a shared understanding of the options as well as the benefits for our students of all the programs that will be available as we move forward. Next slide, please. This slide is more focused broadly on Bill BPS. We have, as Chief Cooter pointed out, not been talking more publicly about Bill BPS for a while because it was, we had pause and due to the pandemic. But now we want to get back out and really reorient folks with where we are with Bill BPS, the projects that we just talked about. So we will start some general update sessions at the top of this coming calendar year, 2021. And in particular, we will focus our efforts with the school communities around BCLA and McCormick, which is well underway. Students, families, and staff have been really engaged in the redesign process. They have been seeking to survey students to get their ideas about the design of the school, about the school culture, so that work will continue. We'll also be talking to local residents and businesses in the area of the facility. With Charlestown and East Boston High School and the Edwards, we'll be having conversations with both residents in the community as well as staff and families in the school communities to plan for the transition. We'll be doing a lot of work around staff transition and to support that, as well as student transition and making sure that our families understand the options available to them as the Edwards School transitions. And lastly, Horace Mann and Jackson Mann, we've been engaging them over the last few months. Mr. Cooter spoke to that, so I won't spend a lot of time there. Just to say that we continue to work very closely with them around the next steps around space and options for them. So with that, next slide, I believe we're going to move to questions, and so I'll turn it back over.
Thank you for your presentation, everybody. And now I'm going to open it up to committee members. If you have questions, if you can raise your hand. Dr. Rivera?
Sorry, it's trying to do the raise hand function.
Yes, you got it. Thank you.
Okay. You know, I just have to be honest, it's really hard to think about building BPS at this moment, given how much work is still needed to get our schools, all of our schools ready, as well as the current declines in our enrollments. So I guess I'm just wondering how are the current declines in the enrollments that we're experiencing right now? You know, how could this affect some of these plans? Like, should we be taking a pause on some of this, given the fact that there are potentially going to be some really significant changes in the enrollments throughout the whole district? I just wonder how you might be, how you're planning for some of that.
We are just, today's just a general introduction to you on some of the projects that were already in the pipeline, Dr. Rivera. And so at the retreat on the 16th, we will be discussing all of the relevant data. We'll be using the equity analysis on all of that. We are just now going to be talking with you and setting the stage for future capital improvements and future capital builds and renovations as we think about enrollment decline, budgets, outcomes, equity, becoming an anti-racist district. So this is just really to share with you some of the existing things that were already in the hopper, so to speak.
And
so at the retreat, we'll be taking a much deeper dive. Chief Cooter?
Yeah, if you don't mind, if I could just add to that, and I just want to recognize the tension that you're feeling with this update in the context of reopening is something that we've been struggling with as an organization, just in terms of, you know, some of these changes are significant to communities. And how do we continue to move forward on this important work, particularly the reconfiguration work, while our community is going through this collective experience, this collective trauma? And that's why we narrowed it to only those projects where we had made public commitments prior. The other thing that I'll just say about the K-6 or the 7 through 12 expansions and the Edwards move, taking these 2 middle schools offline, is that it does help the district to utilize our buildings better and to strengthen our pathways. We're already seeing some initial evidence that K-6 expansions for those K-5 elementary schools is helping us retain students in the upper grades. And so we do believe that we will be a more resilient district from a pathway perspective by having K-6 and 7 to 12 opportunities. The other thing in the context of enrollment declines, you may recall that when we announced the expansion of K-6 in East Boston and 7 through 12 plans for East Boston High School, originally we had thought that those plans were going to need to be a few years out because East Boston had such high enrollment and those schools had too much capacity to serve, or not enough capacity to serve all the kids. And with some enrollment declines that we had experienced in East Boston prior to COVID, it created an opportunity and created the space in the buildings to move the configurations faster. And so what we are going to come back with updates on enrollment projections, and I think it should lead to more discussions about what this means for Bill BPS and the timelines. But that we do think that the moves that we're making now around these reconfigurations are in the best interest of a solid enrollment plan and a solid plan for the district moving forward.
Just one more question, because I joined the school committee also when these plans had already been in, planning for a while. So could you remind me why the Edwards was a decision made to close? Is it because of just a grade configuration, or was there some problem with the building itself? Just want a reminder, a real quick one, if you don't mind.
And I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that. So both the McCormick was selected as the first middle school to move forward, both because of the availability in area elementary schools to take on 6th grade. And then knowing that the building needed limited renovations to be able to move forward structurally. So it had the good infrastructure in place already. So it was not a building emergency, it was a strategic move to reconfigure that middle school. The Edwards similarly became an opportunity when we had space available in our elementary schools in both East Boston and Charlestown at the Harvard Kent to be able to add 6th grade. That's a critical component of any reconfiguration. We do want to take this opportunity to think about upgrades that are needed to the building while it's empty. So that, we've disrupted the community, the building's gonna be empty. There will be some renovations, particularly focused on ADA compliance and improving and upgrading the buildings, but that will again not be a significant multi-year project. What we wanna be able to do is very quickly use that as a school building space in Charlestown and to help understand and meet the needs of that community.
Thank you. I appreciate that review. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Robinson?
Yes, thank you very much for your report. I have a couple of questions. Just one quick one. When will the Boston Arts Academy open?
Brian, you can talk to it because I think we were just checking the other day the final, schedule because of COVID. Some of the construction was behind. So we do maybe, Brian, have an opportunity with a small opening maybe?
Yeah. Sorry, Superintendent. Yes. So as with a lot of construction projects, among other things, a lot of things have been impacted by COVID in the construction industry, including the Boston Arts Academy project. It was originally slated to open September 2021. We were notified within the past couple of weeks that that will likely not be able to happen because of the delay relative to COVID. That being said, we're looking at ways to make certain areas of that building open to the school in the spring of 2022 so that the seniors might be able to have their final performance in the new beautiful theater and graduate from that building so that they can experience the new building that they were expected to be in their final year of school at the BAA. So we're working with the contractor now in the Boston Public Facilities Department who is managing the project to identify when we can get into those spaces so those students can experience this beautiful building firsthand. School leader Ann Clark and others have been heavily involved in the meetings that have been ongoing about this project. And we're going to be hopefully communicating to the larger school community in the coming weeks the actual completion date of the project and whether or not we'll have the ability to open up certain areas of that building earlier than the final completion date.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so one of the other issue is, as we were talking about the issue now of the Edwards between its original promise to the Horace Mann, but now it will remain as part of the Charlestown community. Has there been thought about what kind of school the Edwards would become? We've heard a lot often from families with young children saying there are not enough seats. You know, are you thinking of another elementary, another K-6? What kind of other opportunity are you thinking about for that Edwards building?
Yeah, I want to first start by apologizing for the confusion around the Edwards building as it relates to the Horace Mann School. We did ask members of the school community who were part of the planning team to walk the Edwards space. And they were led to believe that it was, you know, the offer, that it was for them to sort of say, yes, this is the space I want, compared to some of the other sites or other places where we may be able to find space. There were a number of challenges in terms of the timeline for the Edwards building, and then ultimately it was not meant to be an offer. And so I think that's caused some confusion and frustration. And as you heard from a member of the community tonight. So I just want to apologize again for that. And the future plans for the Edwards building, I think we have heard a lot from that community around the need for early childhood seats, as we have across the city. And so we do, you know, I think we need to have conversations about does it make sense as part, you know, Charlestown's easy because there's only a few options, right? There's the Harvard Kent, the Warren Prescott, and then Charlestown High School. And so because we don't think that there's a need for additional supplementary space for Charlestown High School, we are talking about it as supplemental elementary space. I don't think that we're necessarily looking to grow a new school, but that's part of the conversation that we want to have with the community this spring. And it certainly would meet the needs of our UPK commitment to be able to expand more K-1 seats in Charlestown.
Mm-hmm. Given all that COVID is teaching us about buildings, as we continue to look at Build BPS, do we have to put a pause on some of the things we were thinking to go back and relook at some of our current buildings that may or may not have needed, or in 4 years ago, needed certain kinds of renovations. But now, as we're sitting in the middle of COVID and finding that it's our buildings as well as any other number of issues that are preventing us from fully reopening. Our buildings are old, and I'm not quite sure all of the things that are being required of newer buildings, whether it's possible to do them in a cost-effective way in our current buildings.
Ms.
So,
Robinson,
yeah.
we don't want to get ahead of our skis for
Okay.
our December 16th retreat.
Okay.
So we're going to bring all of these dilemmas that
Okay.
we found with COVID, you know, air systems and the importance
Okay.
of air quality to the health and safety of our children and our staff that are in the buildings, the overall cost of our buildings, the pathway work that you all passed prior to my coming, and that impact on enrollment. And we'll break that down by demographics so you can see how many kids we're losing by neighborhood and by race and ethnicity, and grade level. I think that you know, all of this has to be looked at in terms of stabilizing our enrollment and stabilizing our district. And I think that there is going to be opportunity for us to really think more broadly and comprehensively about our school facilities and the kind of learning environments that our children ought to have in terms of opening up opportunity and access.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
we'll get to
We'll
all of those
process it.
questions on the 16th.
Okay. So, okay, I'll
With
just
the
ask.
pertinent data, that's part of our equity analysis, is to
Okay.
make sure that we've done our data work prior
Okay.
to bringing any solutions.
Yeah. Okay, I just have one more, and you can tell me to put that one on hold too. The issue is swing space. This has come up any number of times, that we know as we continue to have new projects, having adequate swing space to house a community continues to be disruptive. With all the COVID changes and many, and not knowing what's going to go on with any other number of buildings in the city, is there an opportunity to identify some types of spaces that could serve over the next decade as swing space, that would be, something that the district can hold on to move various populations through as renovations or new buildings are
That's
taking
right.
place?
We have to think of that, right?
Yeah.
We have to think of that as we think about any new builds or major
Mhm.
renovations that we want to make, or additions. Sometimes those can happen. We think like at the McCormick, by delaying, and splitting the grade levels from coming, we might be able to have them on one floor and then do the other floor, not have as much disruption. But there may be times when you have to completely move out if you're going to do a whole new build or a very
Well, like
major.
the Boston Arts Academy.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yep. So we
right.
will be identifying those
Relocation.
spaces, and then they will be used as we think, longer term in a 10-year kind of capital planning, where we're doing many builds all at the same time, or renovations.
Okay, I'll hold the rest of my questions till our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. James?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, and Mr. Cooter, is it? Thank you for your presentation, beautiful presentation. One of my first questions was about the upgrades to the water fountains in schools. I think it's brilliant. It's something that BSAC has been pushing for quite some time. So I just wanted to commend the superintendent, her team, the city for really putting money into that. My only fear now is of COVID and sort of like the direct contact of mouths, like when you bend down to take a sip of the water and then like another student might come down. Like I feel like some students may be fearful of that. So my question was like more inquiring about the cleanliness and health of these water fountains. Because if I was a student, I wouldn't want to bend down to get water after so close, my mouth so close to it after another student just previously did. Post COVID, since nothing's really going to be going back to normal after this.
That's a really good point, Kimani, and we'll go back and bring that to our environmental team around fountains and the safety of fountains. And would that mean more refill stations, and what does that mean? And so we'll definitely bring that back around to our environmental team, and thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you. My second question is about My Way Cafe. Again, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I'm very, very excited for it. My question, so I know that the presentation said that over 90 schools have transformed their kitchens to support My Way Cafes. And then the final phasing will begin in the summer of 2021. My question is, has there been any student surveys on these My Way Cafes in the 90 schools that have transitioned to it?
I'm not aware of any particular surveys. I can go back to the food nutrition team and find out if they've done any surveys. I will say one of the things that we watch is participation at My Way Cafes. And, I think that we've seen participation go in two sort of directions as we roll out My Way Cafes. For some of the schools that have My Way Cafes, they were former what we refer to as satellite schools. It was the prepackaged meals get brought to the site and maybe heated on site. We saw participation increase when we moved to My Way Cafe and more of the meal being prepared on site. At other places where we had already had a kitchen, and the My Way Cafe was an upgrade to both the options and to make healthier meals and fresher food. There was sometimes a mix. And so we needed the team on the food nutrition services side would often work with the different cafeteria managers to understand the unique sort of tastes and interests of the schools, while also maintaining and promoting the healthier foods that sometimes students won't take. And as a parent of an 8-year-old, I can vouch for the sometimes struggle to get him to eat his vegetables. But you know, so we do look at the participation very closely as sort of a sign of, like, you know, participation. They're really voting with their mouths, I suppose. I should have thought about that phrase before I said it out loud.
So we just also want to mention a big thanks to the mayor and the Shaw Family Foundation for their incredible work to get those started several years ago, and to have the vision and forthright tenacity to really focus on quality food for students rather than the prepackaged, which is a goal of mine and a goal of our food nutrition staff as we begin to actually prepare food right on site. And so we've been able to expand to 13 so far, and we continue to expand more so as we're able to do so in this COVID environment. Makes it a little bit tougher because you can't have the cafeteria style service at this moment.
Yes, thank you for the response. I guess I'll just turn my question into I'll turn that question into a suggestion to whenever we go back into schools, sort of having, I guess 1 or 2 surveys in the year for students to sort of give their opinions about what they think about MWC. My next question is about bathroom upgrades. Again, very, very, very happy to see that happening. Again, just shout out to the city and to just everyone who's been pushing for that and working on that, especially BSAC. Something that BSAC has been working on as sort of an independent project, I know definitely from last year, and possibly could be looped into this, is providing menstrual products for women in the female bathrooms, especially if we're talking about renovating our bathrooms. I think, you know, if you guys are already thinking about that, that's amazing. You know, if not, I think it's something that should be taken under consideration. And then,
You want me to comment on that, Mr. James? We are providing menstrual products, and we're also partnering with Katie's Closet, who has just been absolutely fantastic in providing products even during the COVID response at our food distribution centers. And so just very thankful to Katie's Closet for their partnership, and then our school nurses as well, who are working with our student body. We do have a request from BSAC and from some of the students to have them available in the bathrooms. We're still working to figure out how to do that in an equitable way. So we're going to continue to work on this for access, but those who need them are able to access them from the nurse and also from our Katie's Closet for their own personal use.
you know, I had 2 more things. So one was, I noticed that the pictures of the bathrooms, to me personally, they looked a little bit dull. I know that bathrooms aren't supposed to look fancy or anything, theoretically speaking, but I think it would be really interesting to sort of have some type of like collaborative effort with individual art departments in schools and their students to sort of like spruce up the bathroom stalls and just the bathrooms in general. I have some photos. I wish we had the time to like for me to screen share and show you some of them. But like there's some really beautiful examples and like pictures of middle schools and high schools sort of like getting their students that are in art classes to sort of go into these bathrooms for art class and like write inspiring things and just like make the bathroom look very colorful and very welcoming. And I just thought that'd be like a little fun thing also to sort of like increase the creative minds of young people as well. And then that was my second to last suggestion.
And we talked with the young people. I think we talked with BSAC about that, and or the youth cabinet. I can't remember because we brought it forward to a local foundation to talk with them about possibly doing some partnering with us on that. So it reminds me to circle back around, and I'd love to have your partnership on that, Mr. James and BSAC.
Of course, thank you. And then my very last suggestion concern, I would say, is I read the equity impact statement for this presentation, and I was a tad bit concerned that I wouldn't want to pull it up and like go recite it word for word. I feel like that would be tedious. But the point is, I didn't see anywhere in there that said students were involved in the decision, sort of like these like decision-making processes. Because while in my opinion, these are great, these are overall great, projects and changes being made to our schools and our system, I do think that there are going to be people out there who disagree, and I always feel cautious and hesitant, sort of like fully putting my support behind something without knowing how other people feel. And I believe in the equity impact statement. It just said, there are some BPS officials that worked on it. I believe it referred to teachers, I think parents, but I didn't see the word students in there, which I found very concerning. And these are, again, I always bring this up at every meeting. I feel like I'm getting like really repetitive. But when we talk about equity, I'm confused as to how we can talk about equity without talking about students being involved in the work. I can never seem to wrap my head around that. We're here for students. Everything we do is for the students. If we didn't have students in our district, none of us would have a job. We wouldn't be here. So I just wanted to have that be a sort of not so gentle reminder and push to the folks out there who are doing this really great work to be even greater and really invite student voice, the same students who are directly impacted by these school mergers and these renovations of their bathrooms and different programs and money being poured into their schools for different opportunities. I think it's just really important to have student voice, and that's all I have to say.
And Mr. James, I'm going to have Dr. Granson talk with you about your ideas and work with our equity office on the tool and see how we might be able to adjust the tool to ensure that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. I just have a couple of comments. Thank you for the presentation. I definitely want to ditto a few things Mr. James said about, congratulations on the water. And I think many of us on this lived through the water experience. So it's great to be where we are and have adopted a policy and be able to have this money and do these upgrades. I know our previous colleague, Regina Robinson, and I talked a lot about bathrooms a few years ago. I know she'd be really happy to know that we're, working on the bathrooms. I think it seems like a small thing to people, but really bathrooms, let our students know how we feel about them. And I think they're really important. And I agree with Mr. James's comments. I mean, there's so many, like the Gardner Museum has these like amazing bathrooms, the Barr Foundation. I mean, there's like and we have a lot of talent within BPS to design those and just make them nice, and even have, boards that students can write on, which would deter from, any other writing on the walls or anything. If you have, people have found having like those blackboards painted on, et cetera, will be great. So I'm really glad to see the bathroom piece. The other thing is Dr. Rivera, I understand exactly what she's talking about. It's hard to think about, build BPS when we are in a pandemic, and we have been hearing from our families the struggles, the very, very real struggles they're having. So I appreciate your framing, Mr. Cooter, and also Dr. Casalius, around some of the things that we already had in the pipeline, because I know it will be hard, but we'll be talking about how we're returning, again, looking at the rates, et cetera. I think that we all have the same goal to return to school. The thing I do want to say is, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, I'll just say it here, but I would like us, as we discuss Build BPS, to look at some other areas in our Boston neighborhoods, like Mattapan, who don't have and haven't had attention. So I want to say that for the Edwards building, before the next school committee meeting, I personally would like to see the analysis behind that decision in terms of how it will be used, or maybe it's too early, but for me, it is about equity, and I would like to really understand the decision, to make that an elementary school. I know we've had parents on the call come and testify, and, I want to respect that. But again, I want to also be able to look at like the equity decision, whatever that is, what's the analysis? Because it does, does have to be about equity. And I'll say that, I don't know exactly what happened with the Horace Mann, but I would just say for us to really, to be careful in terms of, taking people on a tour that leads for people to believe that that is, their business. So I appreciate the apology, and I apologize to them as well. But I think we want to be like very clear, moving forward, because we want to create trust and partnership, and that doesn't really feel good. To feel like if we said something and then we took it back. So I don't want to rehash anything, but I just want us to be careful moving forward. And I just want to say lastly, also thank you to the Shaw Foundation. And I know my daughter listens to some of these meetings sometimes, and she always asks, why is there no My Way Cafe at her school? So, because she hears about it all the time. And Mr. James, I don't know if it's happening anymore, but I know the youth that I work with worked on, they presented something around nutrition advisory councils, which were students that were like tasting food and giving opinions. I don't know if that's still happening, but that would be just another way to get input from students moving forward. So that is just all my comments. I appreciate again the presentation, and I thank everyone for testifying tonight. I thank all the committee members, and we look forward to taking action on these recommendations at our next meeting. So now we're going to move on to public comment on reports. I don't know, Ms. Sullivan, if we have any speakers for public comment?
We do not have speakers for public comment on reports.
Okay, thank you very much. Just wanted to bring up if there's any new business. Dr. Coleman.
Thank you, Chair Oliver Davila. This is a, I've been thinking about whether I'm going to do this or not most of the day. And this is coming up with a concern about our ability, the relationship between some of the roles we play in the community, both in terms of our operational responsibility to make decision and review issues concerning the district, and also our ability to be open and available to the rest of the community to hear their voices, concerns, and questions, and respond appropriately to them. Particularly as we look forward to going to the budget season, within the new changes in our technological access, I'm frankly concerned about our ability to both be open to the public, to our community for conversations and comments and perspectives, and get the work done in terms of making decisions in support of the district. And I would love it if we could spend some time thinking through ways in which we can balance those better. For me, and yes, I'm an old guy with gray hair, and so 12 o'clock at night is a tough time for me to turn on to be functional. And so how we can balance those is, I think, going to be important for our effectiveness and our ability to serve our children, and our ability to serve the faculty and staff that we want to support to do that well, in addition to being open to the community. So I don't have we all have ideas, and what do other committees do? And I know that we are unusual in the city by having truly open time before all our meetings. I know the city council manages it differently, and so I don't want to speak out of turn. If I see some nodding heads, but if everyone's comfortable with the current structure, I don't want to get in the way. But I would particularly like to have this conversation outside of an emergency. I don't want to sound like I don't want to hear about people about budget.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear people about the exam schools. I do, but I want to hear it in a way that I can use effectively to support the community and the faculty and staff we have asked to serve us well.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Coleman. I so appreciate your comments. I'm hoping at our retreat, part of my plan is to have a conversation about this because I could not agree with you more. I think we want to create, it will be more meetings for us, but they'll be structured differently. That's my hope, is having this conversation with all of you, because I do agree, you know, in some of the meetings we've had have gone until 2 a.m. and it's very challenging for us to have really
meaningful conversation.
The votes and decisions that we're making that hour. And at the same time, we still want to hear from the community. So I think it's a matter of creating more meetings that can be around specific topics or issues that all of us can take on, like City Council does. We don't all have to be at every meeting. It could be on that. It could also be on, we know, like the exam school, people really wanted to testify, and we would have more meetings that are just testimony. And then when it comes to our school committee meeting, is talk just the business and the vote without all of that. So that's what I want to talk about at our retreat.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I mean, I could not agree more, but obviously want to bring it on the 12th, leave a little time to have that discussion. And we'll be talking with the governance person as well to show us like other models. But I agree. And I've talked to other members. I think they feel similarly that we respect, you know, the votes that we have, the policies that we're making, and give it like that time that is necessary to discuss. And at the same time, give the community also time to speak, including, you know, having a discussion on, I know in other open meetings in the city, they do cut people off. The volume goes down at 2 minutes. And I want to be, you know, respectful to people, but when you have 108 speakers and people go on and on. So I do want to have those tough conversations there in our retreat. Thank you for bringing that up.
And so we're brainstorming a little bit about ideas. One of the things that Ms. Sullivan says every day is people will talk about the same issue, they can consolidate. And if we could find a way to facilitate that, to serve a more coherent and supportive community approach to particular some of our challenges, that may be one way to make us more, make the conversations more useful for all concerned.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to having that conversation with all of you at our retreat. So that concludes our business for this evening. The committee will hold a virtual retreat on Saturday, December 12th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The retreat will be open to the public and all are welcome. The agenda and Zoom link will be posted on the committee's webpage, bostonpublicschools.org/school committee. We hope that you can all join us. And also the next school committee meeting will take place on Wednesday, December 16th at 5 p.m. here on Zoom. So if there is nothing further, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Robinson, and second from Dr. Coleman. Is there any discussion or objection to this motion? Okay, Ms. Sullivan, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Coleman,
Yes, have a good night, everybody.
Dr. Rivera,
Yes, buenas noches.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes, good night.
Mr. Tran,
Yes, good night.
Good night.
Ms. Oliver Davila.
Yes, good night.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Take care.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.